Chapter 750. The fact that a Grade 2 flame spirit was taken down so easily was out of Grimm's expectations. However, in the next second, Grimm's delight was replaced by a deep sense of fear. Beep. Warning. Energy disturbance detected. Countdown to explosion of the core. 5, 4, 3, throw it. Hurry up and throw it away. Fortunately, the Balrog had a direct spiritual link with Grimm. By the time Grimm realized something was wrong, the Balrog had already flung the Grade 2 flame spirit into the distance with all its might. 2-1 As the AI chip finished its countdown, the flame spirit that had flown 100 meters away suddenly vibrated with energy, and a small mushroom cloud exploded on the spot. This short amount of time was not enough for Grimm and the Balrog to teleport out of the explosion's range. Hence, the moment they appeared 200 meters away with flaming leap, the terrifying shockwave of flames had already caught up to them. Grimm's robes were instantly torn to shreds by the flames. The Balrog turned around and stood in front of Grimm, using its thick and sturdy back to block the shockwave. If someone were to look down from above the fire grove, they would see a huge and violent ring of flames rapidly engulfing everything within a 5-kilometer radius. Even the deep-rooted 10,000-year fire trees were destroyed like simple thatched huts by the shockwaves of the flames. The terrifying flaming mushroom cloud, the surging shockwave, the devastating flame wave. The entire scene immediately presented a horrifying scene, as if it was the end of the world. If this was a material plane, such a terrifying energy explosion would definitely leave a bottomless pit in the ground. It might even corrode through the rock stratum and force the magma out, forming a small lava lake. However, this was a fire elemental plane after all. Most of the damage from the flames was absorbed by the surrounding air and earth. Although the shockwave from the explosion seemed earth-shattering and frightening, the energy level of the flames would decrease by 1 or 2 ranks every kilometer it extended. When the sea of flames extended to a 5-kilometer radius, the temperature had dropped from 13,000 degrees Celsius to 300 degrees Celsius. This temperature was close to the average temperature of a fire elemental plane. After the wave of flames subsided, Grimm finally managed to stand up straight. On the other hand, the body of the Balrog that stood before him was in tatters. Even its body that was composed of sturdy lava boulders and flowing magma had large areas of damage. With a crack, the terrifying flame demon's body disintegrated, once again shrinking from a 7-meter-tall flame monster into a fist-sized demon puppet crystal core. The Rank 2 flame spirit's self-detonation had severely overdrawn the elemental energy stored in the demon puppet crystal core. The terrifying flame demon could no longer maintain its huge body, and was forced back to its original form. Roars and roars could be heard from afar, and they were rapidly approaching. Grimm picked up the demon puppet core without hesitation, turned around, and fled the scene of the battle. Grimm ran back to where the flame gate was, and returned it to its original size. Then, he entered the gate. Then, the huge light gate formed by pure flames quickly collapsed. A quarter of an hour later, a large group of burning flame spirits chased after them and firmly surrounded the grassland that still had strange spatial fluctuations. A moment later, a female flame spirit with a complete human form appeared in the middle of the group. With her appearance, all the flame spirits bowed in greeting, even the Rank 2 flame spirits. Lord Manzida, the enemy escaped from here. A Rank 2 flame spirit leading the group took a step forward and introduced respectfully. This new high-ranked flame spirit was not like her low-ranked companions, who had the upper half of a human and the lower half of a fire cloud. Instead, she had the complete body of a female human. Her body was curvaceous, and she wore a strange dark red armor. Her facial features were distinct, but they were not as delicate and gentle as those of a real human. Her reddish-brown hair was draped over her back, and from time to time there would be clusters of beautiful little flames. I can smell the aura of an evil magus from another world. It seems like the one who ambushed our patrol team was a magus from the Magus world. Now that he's escaped, you don't have to worry anymore. However, from today onwards, keep a close watch on all the weak points in the space within 100 miles of the Black Mountain. If you find any evil magi sneaking over, immediately send troops to kill them. Yes. Yes. With the various flame spirits receiving their orders, the burning flame spirits that had gathered here began to disperse one after another. The remaining flame spirits worked together to set up a warning trap around the weak point in the space. This way, if any outsiders tried to sneak into the fire elemental plane, they would be notified immediately. Grim, who had escaped back to the blazing flame monarch in one go, only relaxed after the door of fire had completely disappeared. The short adventure in the fire elemental plane had allowed him to understand how terrifying other worlds were. While the rank 2 burning flame spirit had a powerful body, it did not have many battle techniques or killing methods. The way they fought was still so primitive and clumsy. It seemed like the battle between the fire creatures relied more on close combat. The fire spells they used were just a method to control and wear down their opponent's patience. However, while their methods were primitive, their temperaments were tyrannical and vicious. Not only were they vicious to their enemies, they were vicious to themselves as well. Once they were defeated or captured, they would detonate their flame cores the moment they lost control of their body. That was the final vessel that carried their consciousnesses. Once they self-destructed, the last trace of their existence would be erased. This sort of ruthlessness and decisiveness was not something an ordinary person could achieve. Grim stood on the fire elemental altar for a while. Only when the spatial undulations had completely calmed down and there were no signs of another world invading did he heave a sigh of relief. He opened his palm. In his left hand was the core to summon the terrifying Balrog, while in his right were the cores of 3 rank 1 flame spirits. Due to the difference in rank and strength, the 3 rank 1 flame spirits were not able to self-destruct before Grim destroyed their bodies and dug out their cores. Now that they were in Grim's hands, even if their consciousnesses were still attached to the cores, they could no longer self-destruct. However, after taking a closer look at the cores, Grim could not help but furrow his brows. He had the AI chip scan the cores of the Balrog puppets, and finally obtained more detailed information. If he wanted to completely repair it, it would probably take him at least a month to complete. The gains did not make up for the losses. He had obtained the cores of 3 rank 1 flame spirits, but the cores of the terrifying rank 2 Balrog puppets had been damaged. This was a loss. It was no wonder that magi liked to travel together when exploring other worlds. Turned out that the risks were so great. Grim shook his head and sighed. He could only turn around and walk out of the secret room. The next exploration of the fire elemental plane would be in a month's time. The forest was dense, and the giant trees towered into the sky. A group of 5 adventurers cut their way through the thistles and thorns, making their way through the dark forest with great difficulty. The one in charge of paving the way was a burly bald man with a sturdy physique. He wore leather armor and wielded a long blade. He spent a great deal of effort to cut down the intersecting vines, and used his huge body to carve out a winding path in the shrubbery where there was nowhere to stand. Behind him were 4 strange figures of varying heights, and their entire bodies were shrouded in thick black robes. The few of them advanced in silence. Apart from the heavy breathing of the burly bald man, they could not hear anything else. Where are we now? How far are we from Snakebird Cliff? Suddenly, the skinniest black-robed person in the middle of the group could not help but ask in a low voice. From her voice, it seemed that she was a beautiful and gentle young lady. Eek, be quiet. This is the dark forest. If there is no danger, it's best not to make a sound, the tallest and sturdiest black-robed person reprimanded in a low voice. Although his tone was not strict, it revealed a trace of convincing dignity. All right, Boss Pang, we all know your abilities. This is only the edge of the dark forest. Could it be that there is still any danger for you? The black-robed person walking at the back of the group was obviously driven mad by the gloomy and stifling environment of the forest. He took off his hood and took in large gulps of the damp and gloomy air. They were acolytes with weak bodies. If they were to put on the metal armor, they would not even be able to walk half a mile in the dark forest before collapsing from exhaustion. Hence, in order to prevent the sharp thorns and broken branches from cutting their skin, they could only put on a thick traveler's robe over their robes. The most direct consequence of this was that each and every one of them was about to suffocate to death. The one called Boss Pang was naturally the young quasi-sorcerer with an affinity with the dark element, Ponter. This time, he personally led his 4 close subordinates to Snake-Bird Cliff for the sake of those delicious snake-bird eggs. Of course, now was the breeding season for the snake-bird beast. If they could steal 1 or 2 snake-bird babies from their nests, they would be able to make a lot of money. However, no matter what, the snake-bird beasts were a type of quasi-sorcerer magical creature. Once their whereabouts were exposed, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed. Chapter 751. Shadowlight Team. Leader. Prospective Wizard Ponter, male, 37 years old, talent with dark element. There were 4 members. Body Refinery Apprentice, Daxo, Advanced. Plant Apprentice, Eichel, Female, Intermediate. Shapeshifting Apprentice, Blanc, Intermediate. And Goblin Magician Locke Jr., Beginner. Little Locke was not qualified to join the Shadowlight Team. However, Eek's strong recommendation, coupled with the fact that Locke's path as a magician didn't focus too much on individual strength, and that he had some strange characteristics that other professions didn't have, Ponter allowed him to become a member of the team. This team of 5 had Body Refinery Apprentice Daxo as a tank, Plant Apprentice Eco as a healer, and a magic machinist who was good at scouting and disrupting the situation. This way, even if they encountered powerful magical beasts, they would be able to deal with them calmly. The core of the team, prospective Wizard Ponter, would be the one to deal the most damage. As for the shapeshifting school, it was a strange advancement path that had suddenly appeared in the White Tower over the past 6 months. Most of the knowledge in it came from a magical world called Faern. It was said that there was a magical class called the Druid who could communicate with animals and plants with their natural affinity. The most powerful ability of the Druid was to transform into a ferocious magical beast at will. Then, with the instantaneous racial ability and strong body, they would be invincible on the battlefield. After the Crimson family obtained this knowledge from another world, they slightly modified it into a new subject within the family. The Shape-Shifting School. Wizard apprentices who mastered the shape-shifting spell could freely switch between Violent Hellbear, Shadow Cheetah, and Wind Eagle. This allowed them to have more diverse and unpredictable combat method. Of course, these 3 transformations were only basic subjects that all shape-shifting apprentices had to master. If they wanted more powerful transformations, they would need a large number of points and magic crystals to exchange for knowledge from the family library. Hence, during this period of time, the lucrative family missions in the nearby Dark Forest had become extremely popular, and they were practically monopolized by combat teams formed by quasi-sorcerers the moment they appeared. As for the lone wolves in the wilderness, or those who had no one to rely on, they could only pick up some small missions that others looked down on, or simply squat in the wizard's pagoda and slowly grind their daily routines. The progress of a sorcerer apprentice was almost entirely dependent on accumulating points and magic crystals. If he was slow at first, he would be slow at every step. He would only have to clean the laboratory, help the official sorcerers sort out some magic materials, and act as the manager of the magic facilities. It would be wishful thinking for him to advance by leaps and bounds with such a job. That was why in the past few days, the Scarlet apprentices with some ability had all been mobilized. They had almost completely cleared out the dark forest around the White Tower. Some of the ferocious monsters that resided here were naturally unwilling to be chased away. They began to frequently ambush the Crimson acolytes that came out to do quests. A few teams had already been ambushed, and there were casualties among the Scarlet apprentices. Because of this, the family had specially sent the insect lich, Lord Bliss, into the Black Forest to kill 11 Lord-ranked monsters in one go. As a result, the previously arrogant magical creatures immediately disappeared and began to show signs of migration into the depths of the Dark Forest. However, in this way, the danger level of the Black Forest immediately dropped by several levels, and it quickly became the best place for all acolytes to train and explore. "Do you want to die, Blanc?" Ponter reprimanded with dissatisfaction. "Though the Lord-ranked monsters here have all been eliminated by Lord Bliss, there are still many Magus monsters left. Do you think a team like ours will be able to escape from these guys alive?" "Boss, we can't be that unlucky, can we?" Blanc was a sharp-tongued and slippery youth. He wore light leather armor, and there were 2 blue lines below the family crest of the burning iron fist on his chest. This signified that he had already grasped the other 2 transformation spells besides the Gale Eagle. "No one knows if I've mastered it or not. However, if we really meet an enemy, I'll definitely stuff you into the monster's mouth first." Ponter threatened fiercely, but anyone could hear the mocking tone in his voice. "Why don't we find a place to rest for a while?" The female acolyte Ike said gently. "We've already been walking in the Black Forest for half a day. It's time to find a place to rest and tidy up." During this period of time, Ike and Ponter's relationship had rapidly improved. He naturally obeyed the words of his sweetheart. "Little Loke, hurry and find a clean and safe place nearby." "Got it." Upon receiving the order, the little goblin who had been quietly waiting in the middle of the team immediately took out the eyeball mech from his waist pouch and tossed it into the air. A metal ball the size of a human head floated gently in the air. Creak, following the sound of mechanical gears grinding, the mysterious patterns on the surface of the eyeball mech began to light up one by one. Then, a hidden metal door opened, revealing a dark red mechanical eyeball inside. The mechanical eyeball could move and explore freely like a human eye. When the broken ruby in the middle of the eyeball began to charge, it could shoot out a sharp scorching ray of light, giving it a decent attack. The little goblin then took out a strange-looking metal hat and put it on his head. The top of the hat was equipped with a thought wave amplifier, so even if the eyeball mech was 3 to 5 miles away, it could still be remotely controlled. The front of the metal cap was equipped with a monocle that gave off a sci-fi vibe. It could project everything that the eyeball mech saw onto the tiny lens, allowing the little goblin to grasp the situation of the battlefield around the eyeball mech at all times. After all the preparations were done, the eyeball mech whizzed into the surrounding forest following Little Loke's command. It nimbly bypassed the dense foliage and thick branches, evaded the hanging vines, and quickly disappeared into the depths of the dark forest. Little Loke held his breath and focused on controlling the eyeball mech to quickly shuttle through the Black Forest. As he flew at top speed, he quickly scanned the forest below him. Soon, Little Loke could not help but let out a soft cry. "Found it! In that direction, 3 miles away. There's a relatively hidden col with a water source around it. It's more suitable for camping." Ponter nodded in satisfaction. Although the little goblin's combat ability was not that great, his small waist pouch was filled with all kinds of strange magical equipment, each of which had unique special abilities. All in all, he was a good adventurer. "Let's go, let's rest there for an hour before continuing our journey. We must reach the family's camp number 3 before dark." "Let's go." Ponter's order made all the team members exclaim softly. Everyone's pace immediately became lighter, just like their current mood. The so-called family campsite was actually a temporary campsite that Lord Blitz had transformed from the original lair of the Lord-class magical beasts into a temporary campsite. All the teams of apprentices who were adventuring in the Black Forest could seek temporary shelter in one of the nearby family camps if they could not find a more suitable and safe camp. There was a protective spell formation set up by a magus and a clean place to rest. It was far better than sleeping in the open and eating hard bread every day. However, what made the apprentices most satisfied was the safety there. They could light a bonfire in the family camp, barbecuing or cooking delicious food, and there were also clean and tidy bed. What more could they ask for if they could enjoy such treatment in the Black Forest? Deep in the Black Forest, at the top of a low cliff, a black-robed Bliss stood alone in the cold wind, allowing the cold wind to blow at the corners of his robes. When the Shadow Optics team slowly approached the family's camp number 3, Bliss finally turned his body and aimed his 2 big and 2 small green eyes at a certain place in the boundless forest. At this moment, the entire Black Forest was covered with his eye worms. Any team of acolytes that infiltrated the Black Forest seemed to be alone and without anyone to rely on, but in fact, everything they did was under the strict supervision of the insect Lich Bliss. The family had not sent Bliss here to eliminate those brainless and stupid lords of the monsters, but to secretly protect the family's newly developed strength. Bliss would not rashly interfere with acolytes' normal training and exploration. Even if the team was in danger, as long as the risk was within an acceptable range, he would not interfere. After all, only when the acolytes were on the brink of life and death could they gain nourishment from it. However, if the acolytes encountered a powerful monster that they could not defeat, or if the whole team was about to be annihilated, the insect Lich Bliss would secretly take action and use a covert method to save them from danger. Of course, the clan would never announce such a thing to the public. Hence, the insect Lich Bliss mission was not only arduous, but also trivial. If not for his omnipresent eye worms and his terrifyingly powerful insect army, normal magi would not be able to take on this underground babysitting type of protection mission. Of course, other than protection, the insect Lich Bliss also had the mission to expel those ferocious and violent monsters. And now, with the unexpected discovery of an eye worm in the distance, Bliss had found traces of a human-shaped magic scorpion. This kind of monster with a strong arachnid style was actually the one that Bliss was most interested in. From them, Bliss could always extract many evolutionary factors that were helpful to him. Chapter 752. The Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda. Grimm slowly awoke from his deep slumber. The first thing he did after opening his eyes was let the AI chip scan his body to confirm his mental state. The host's spiritual force is 26,3892. Grimm furrowed his brows, once again feeling the mysteriousness and power of the wizard world. Even though the AI chip's scan of his spiritual force was accurate to 4 decimal places, and even though he had undergone 4 hours of deep meditation the night before, his spiritual force seemed to have been locked down by a mysterious force. However, the value of his mental strength seemed to be completely locked by a mysterious force, and his daily deep meditation could no longer increase it in the slightest. Grimm had the AI chip scan his cerebral cortex more thoroughly, but it was a pity that it could not find the crux of the wizard's contract restricting his progress. After all, the domain that the AI chip controlled was made up of real matter. Once he encountered such a mysterious and illusory spell, he could only rely on Grimm's spiritual force to slowly sense it and comprehend it. In truth, Grimm had even suspected that the wizard's contract was using hypnosis to lock down his strength. He had even allowed the AI chip to hypnotize him instead. Unfortunately, he had failed. After a period of research, Grimm was finally sure that the wizard's contract was affecting his spiritual force through the hidden laws of the plane. Because this kind of power had already exceeded the scope of his current strength, it was not something that he could analyze and break alone. Want to research the laws of the plane? He had to push his spiritual force to the point where he could analyze the laws of the plane. This was a hard nut to crack. If he could not reach this level, he would not have the right to come into contact with the laws of the plane. If he could not come into contact with the laws of the plane, how could he research it? Fortunately, with the help of the AI chip, Grimm did not come out of this undeserved calamity unscathed. At the very least, after going against the wizard's contract, Grimm unexpectedly had a vague understanding of the workings of the laws of the plane. It could not be helped, as the laws of the plane were affecting him. Grimm frowned as he slowly sat up on his bed. The first thing he did after waking up was to wash up. However, after advancing to a grade 2 fire wizard, Grimm had naturally developed a dislike for the water elemental particles, and even the natural world's water. Under normal circumstances, apart from the water required to maintain a human's body, Grimm rarely showered. Grimm's house was big, very big. Apart from the luxurious bed in the middle of the room, the huge and luxurious magic mirror in the corner was the most eye-catching. But at this moment Grimm stood upright in front of the magic mirror. The numerous blood elf maids that had been waiting for a long time swarmed forward and surrounded him, busying themselves enthusiastically and briskly. She helped him undo the light and soft nightgown, helped him take off the weightless spider silk underwear, and helped him smooth his waist-long dark red hair. When all his clothes were taken off, Grimm was completely naked. His exposed muscles were graceful and smooth, his muscles were well-defined, strong and plump, and there was almost not a trace of excess fat on his body. The proportions of his limbs could also be described as perfect and coordinated. Through his translucent skin, one could even see the pure flame energy flowing slowly like magma within his dark red body. Coupled with the dark red long hair that draped over his back and the burning black pupils that were so bright that no one dared to look at them directly, Grimm's entire body was overflowing with a demonic and mysterious aura. The blood elf maids surrounding him all had greedy and thirsty gazes in their eyes as they lovingly scanned every muscle and line on Grimm's well-built body. They were intoxicated by their male master's manly aura, and the pure, surging blood energy in his body made them even crazier. Grimm clenched his fists tightly, and a bright red flame seeped out of the countless pores on his body, instantly turning him into a tall and mighty human figure made of flames. A moment later, all the dust, skin, and other substances on his body disappeared without a trace in the flames that quickly swept past him. With Grimm's current control over fire, even if the blood elf maids surrounded him, they would not be harmed by the elemental flames at all. The blood elf maids seemed to be used to such a scene, and as soon as the flames disappeared, they swarmed him once again and helped him put on a brand new set of spider silk underwear, as well as the red robe that represented the dignity of a fire wizard. Throughout the entire process, Grimm just stood there with his eyes closed. He didn't even need to move his pinky to complete the entire process. As for the little molestation of the seductresses during the changing process, it was difficult to avoid. They circled around Grimm and laughed softly, revealing their seductiveness. Their slender fingers even took the opportunity to lightly brush past Grimm's muscles that were filled with explosive power. Their coquettish laughter rang out incessantly, and their teasing movements were even more enchanting if there were too many wolves and not enough meat, and if not for Grimm's hidden majesty preventing them from being too impudent, some of the blood elves might have already taken the initiative to throw themselves into his arms. They could be considered to have seen it clearly. Since their master was willing to place them by her beloved wizard's side, it went without saying that there was a reason behind it. Besides, if they could charm this handsome and tough wizard to have sex with him, they were willing to bear the consequences even if they had to suffer a small punishment from their mistress, Mary. After all, his robust physique and scalding blood energy were all things that they could only dream of evolving into. If it was in the past, Grimm might not have been able to control himself with so many women throwing themselves at him, even with his self-control. However, with the improvement of his strength and willpower, such shallow seductions could no longer move the deeply hidden human heart in him. It was fine for him to copulate mercilessly without love to soothe his body and mind, but it was still a taboo for ambitious people to indulge in lust. After trying to entangle with Grimm for a while, The blood elf maids could only leave regretfully when they saw that Grimm's gaze was still cold and imposing. A moment later, Grimm sat calmly in the spacious living room and began to eat his breakfast. When the warm sunlight shone into the room through the long, narrow window, Grimm felt a sense of warmth. Only then did he begin to leisurely enjoy the medium-rare earth-fire dragon ribs. A level 1 blood elf female spellcaster stood beside him with her back bowed. She used a gentle and melodious voice to report to him the recent financial situation of the family, as well as the intelligence gathered by the 2 wizard pagodas. The flame monarch was deep underground, and there was naturally no warm sunlight. Thus, everything that Grimm was enjoying was actually simulated by the wizard's pagoda using elemental energy. When it came to creating a good state of mind, the wizards were never stingy. The roasted meat on the plate in front of him weighed at least 2 kilograms, and had been carefully smoked and roasted. The skin was fragrant and golden, while the insides were tender and soft. There was even a layer of fragrant sauce on the surface of the meat. Grimm tucked in his napkin, picked up his silver knife and fork, and lightly cut off a small piece. He placed it in his mouth, and the complex taste of the delicacy exploded in his mouth. There was the delicacy of the food, and the sauce complemented it. However, what Grimm was most intoxicated with was the rich fire elemental energy that surged between his teeth. It had to be said that a single bite of the earth-fire dragon ribs, that had been prepared using a secret method, was no less than a quarter of an hour of deep meditation. Furthermore, this method of replenishing fire elemental energy did not have any side effects, and there was no problem of excessive consumption. It was the favorite method of all wizards. However, good Terra fire dragon beasts were usually hidden in the depths of lava volcanoes. It was not an easy task to find their tracks and successfully kill them. If Grimm had not discovered a small group of earth-fire dragons in the lava tunnels beneath the Flame Monarch's wizard's pagoda, he might not have dared to indulge in such an extravagant feast of earth-fire dragons that cost hundreds of magical crystals. Of course, it was not as if there was no delicacy better than the earth-fire dragons in the world. At the very least, in the areas that Grimm could get his hands on, there was a better substitute for the earth-fire dragons. That was fire dragon meat. The earth-fire dragon was a type of subdragon, a branch of the dragon race's many mixed-blood descendants. Compared to a real fire dragon, the quality of its meat was naturally many times worse. Grimm did not get a taste of the level 2 fire dragon from before. Other than some leftovers, the rest was all eaten by Ollie. Truth be told, the level 2 fire dragon was the size of a small hill when it fell to the ground, and Ollie's body was so petite. Even now, Grimm could not imagine how she managed to devour the entire level 2 fire dragon. Even though Grimm wanted to take a look, Ollie chased them away with the excuse that it was a private matter. Furthermore, when the Firemaw Draconians launched a large-scale attack, everyone was too busy fighting and had forgotten about this matter. Level 2 fire dragons were not easy to find, but there were plenty of level 1 fire dragons in the Lance realm. Over the past few days, Grimm had given the brain monster, Gazruega, many missions. He wanted it to quickly investigate the number of level 1 fire dragons, as well as their respective habitats. Once this information was in place, Grimm's dragon-slaying team from the Crimson family would be able to secure a fire dragon feast. As he devoured the delicacy in front of him, Grimm silently listened to the information regarding his family and the wizard's pagoda. He did not comment on most of the information, only allowing the AI chip to store it. Only when he encountered something that interested him would he stop eating and let the beautiful blood elf spellcaster analyze it in detail. Chapter 753. The Magus world seemed to be at war with another powerful plane. This information was definitely reliable. It came from the leader of the Witches of Destiny, Alice. Originally, with Grimm's qualifications and wealth, it would have been impossible for him to come into contact with this level of power and information. If Alice had not given him all the information that the Witches of Destiny had obtained, Grimm would not have known about this fight between gods even if the heavens fell and the earth split apart. According to Alice's information, the Magus world seemed to be at war with a small branch of the world of gods, the Orc pantheon. The so-called world of gods was not like the native gods of Faern. Instead, it was a camp of gods formed by a powerful pantheon that had a wide range of beliefs across planes. No matter how powerful the gods of Faern were, they only had a single faith of a certain isolated race. Once the Faern plane was overthrown, these gods would have no other way out than to perish. Most of the gods in the world of gods had spread their faith to more than 200 planes. This way they had many followers, and the power of faith they gathered naturally increased. Their divine force was so strong that it made people despair. Moreover, these gods who possessed faith across planes could no longer be easily wiped out by the destruction of a single plane of faith. As long as we don't destroy all the believers we spread, we won't have any risk of dying. If there was anyone in the multiverse who could truly live forever, it would be these gods who had faith across planes. The one that was at war with the Magus world was one of the more powerful pantheons in the world of gods, the Orc pantheon. Their main god was the beast god who possessed the strength of a tier 8 beast god, and he also had the terrifying title of one-eyed tyrant. He was tyrannical by nature and crazed for battle. Most of his followers were cruel and bloodthirsty barbarians. As he usually appeared as a one-eyed male orc covered in heavy and crude black armor, his fanatical followers would often look away to show their respect. And this orc master god, Ash, had nearly 20 gods of various sizes under his command. All of them were orc gods who were adept at fighting and killing. This time, for some unknown reason, the powerful orc god system had actually clashed with the sorcerer's world. Both sides fought against each other in countless outer plane worlds, destroying each other's subsidiary planes. For a time, the flames of war spread to hundreds and thousands of large, medium, and small plane worlds. As the origin of the sorcerer faction, the sorcerer world was naturally carefully protected by the great sorcerers and was not involved in the war. However, in response to the call of the extraterrestrial great sorcerers, the sorcerers' world had also sent out a large number of sorcerers' legions to various battlefields, fighting to the death with the believers of the orc god system in countless material planes. According to what Alice had revealed, in the past 100 years alone, there were already 7 large, medium, and small dimensions that had been involved in the flames of war and were either destroyed or destroyed. Even if there were billions of living beings in each plane, the total number of living beings that had perished in the flames of war had already reached a shocking number. It was a pity that even such a brutal and bloody war was merely an insignificant ripple in the vast multiverse. The other gods of the world of gods, as well as the many powerful races of the multiverse, were only watching this small conflict with the attitude of a spectator. In the eyes of those high and mighty experts, 100 years and billions of lives were nothing more than a game of chess that was played by them. One of the main reasons why Alice had revealed this information to Grimm was that she did not want him to misjudge the true strength of the Northern Witches. In the past 100 years, most of the Northern Witches' strength had been involved in this war. Therefore, the strength of the factions of the Northern Witches that Grimm had investigated and sensed did not represent their true strength. Once the various factions of the Northern Witches had summoned back the sorcerers that had been stationed in the secondary planes, their strength would immediately increase by 5 to 6 times. If the extraterrestrial great sorcerers were to get involved, the Crimson family and the Witches of Destiny would not be able to do anything to them. If Alice had not broken free from the puppet control of the first Witch of Destiny, they would still have a powerful Witch of Destiny to rely on. It was a pity that Alice had killed the puppet avatar left behind by the first Witch of Destiny, which also made him the enemy of the other party. In the days since she had become the new leader of the Witch of Destiny, Alice had been trying her best to understand one thing. Why had the Tower of Destiny opened again? Why had she been involved in this war of destiny? Why had the first Witch of Destiny left behind such a terrifying puppet? In the past, she could not understand no matter how much she thought about it. Even if she expended her life force to deduce and divine, she would not receive any response or feedback from the Magus world. However, ever since she had advanced to Grade 2, it was as if she had broken free from an invisible chain of fate. She had inexplicably obtained some vague clues from the Magus world's plain will. The opening of the Tower of Destiny, the bloodshed of the War of Destiny, and the appearance of that Witch of Destiny's puppet. Everything was related to the first Witch of Destiny. Seriously speaking, after the first Witch of Destiny had been forced to leave the Magus world by the plain will, she had lost a great place to collect the power of destiny. Naturally, she would not give up without a fight. Instead, she used the Tower of Destiny and the War of Destiny to play a quick game of raising a pig. The decline of the Witch of Destiny was, in fact, all caused by the first Witch of Destiny. She used the imprint of her consciousness left in the Magus world's plain law to promote a war of destiny every few hundred years. Then, she gathered a large number of people favored by destiny in the Tower of Destiny and let the puppet be responsible for presiding over the sacrificial ceremony. Just like that, a new Grade 4 Witch of Destiny would be born without a hitch. When the puppet took the huge power of destiny out of the Magus world and into the void, the first Witch of Destiny would naturally have a way to find it and then devour it. Using this method, she could achieve her goal of collecting the power of destiny in the Magus world. The Witch of Destiny had perished for nearly 1,000 years because she had plundered the power of destiny too ruthlessly last time, which caused a backlash from the Magus world's plain will. Now, after nearly 1,000 years of silence, she sensed that the power of destiny in the Magus world had begun to gather again. She could not help but once again promote a new round of War of Destiny. Unfortunately, under the interference of the plane's consciousness, the puppet avatar she had left behind had unexpectedly died in Alice's hands. This undoubtedly greatly delayed her plan of collecting the new power of destiny, and also caused the future War of Destiny to turn to a branch of destiny that she could not smoothly control. And this time, it was very likely that the mastermind behind the deception which incident was the first Witch of Destiny who had been eyeing Alice covetously. Of course, as Alice's creditor and future husband, Grimm was also very curious about the first Witch of Destiny. Unfortunately, no matter how much he asked, Alice did not mention her name. This also seemed to be related to a strange ability of the Witch of Destiny. Even if you were separated by thousands of mountains and tens of thousands of rivers, even if you were hiding in a different plane millions of miles away, as long as you said or meditated on the name of the Witch of Destiny, she could magically sense everything related to her. It sounded nonsensical and strange, but the truth was just that bizarre. Therefore, before she could block the other party's perception of destiny, Alice would never reveal her name to anyone, of course, including Grimm. Level 8 Orc Core Deity. Wizard Faction. The first Witch of Destiny. Even though Grimm was in the safety of his private wizard's pagoda, he could not help but shiver when he saw these shocking words. He was secretly shocked by the twists and turns of his destiny. If he was just an insignificant ordinary creature in the wizard world, he would not have any connection to these boring battles between deities. But now, as he became stronger step by step, and Alice had become a powerful helper that he couldn't do without, these illusory and seemingly ridiculous legends had turned into a poisonous thorn in his heart, making him unable to eat or sleep in peace. In the eyes of the first Witch of Destiny, Alice, Grimm, and the rest were just despicable ants that had disrupted her chess game under the control of the plain will. They were not worthy of her treating them as equal opponents. Besides, that Alice was still weak and posed no threat to her at all. Therefore, she could not simply erase Alice's existence. She could only use some crafty plots to slowly clip Alice's wings, thinking of how to use Alice's hand to guide the chaos in front of her onto the right track she had set. It had to be said that becoming a level 2 wizard meant that Grim and Alice had broken away from the shackles of the lower class, and their horizons had been expanded many times. The various secrets of the world and the secrets of high-level wizards had gradually filled their ears, allowing them to understand the truth of the world hidden behind layers of fog. But the more they knew, the heavier the burden in their hearts. Even with Grim's strength and confidence, he could only struggle to survive in this strange and bizarre world. Grim waved his hand to dismiss the beautiful blood elf spellcaster who was constantly reporting information to him. He sighed and finally began to seriously eat the breakfast in front of him. There had always been a saying among the wizards that ridiculed them. Only the wizard who could eat the most was the most powerful wizard. The use of any extraordinary power consumed a shocking amount of energy. Without a strong body, it was impossible to activate a wizard's spell that could destroy the world. And where did the energy come from? Naturally, it all came from eating. Therefore, when he could not come up with a good solution to the problem in front of him, Grim ordered himself to eat as much as he could. Chapter 754. Within a secret magic room. Bright but not glaring white magic lamps illuminated every corner of the room. In front of an intricate high-grade alchemy table, Grim was carefully pouring the molten fire loathsome iron from a magic crucible into a metal mold. When it was in a semi-solid state, he picked up a carving knife and carefully engraved magic patterns and runes on it. This fire-loathsome iron was the best material Grim could find to make magic bracelets. Its melting point was 9,327 degrees. Due to its high hardness and extraordinary magic resistance, Grim could only carve the flame spell formation grooves on it when it was in a semi-molten state. In order to prevent a brilliant magus from quickly deciphering the contents of the spell formation, Grim had to add some decorative patterns and lines to the spell formation system to conceal its original function, in addition to the normal offensive spell formation, energy-gathering spell formation, and support runes. All of this had to be done when the fire-loathsome iron was in a semi-solid state. Grim estimated that it took about 210 seconds for the bracelet to completely condense from the time it was poured to the time it was completely condensed. During this time, Grim had to carve 13 offensive spell formations, 25 energy-gathering spell formations, 421 support runes, and 74 magic patterns. It was easy to imagine the difficulty of carving so much information on a metal bracelet that was 70 centimeters in diameter and 30 centimeters in width. More importantly, the entire process had to be done in one go without any pauses. Otherwise, once the fire-loathsome iron cooled down, even a magic carving knife enchanted with sharpness and armor break would not be able to cut through it. Magic flame temperature reduced by 7 degrees, Grim used a bit of his spiritual force to connect to the control crystal on the alchemy table and lowered the magic flame temperature of 9,800 degrees by an indiscernible 7 degrees. Activating support spell formation 3, Grim then used a bit of his spiritual force to adjust the alchemy table according to the AI chip's instructions. Magic carving knife infusion completed. After using his spiritual force to activate the sharpness and armor penetration effects of the magic carving knife, Grim followed the AI chip's instructions and gently placed the tip of the knife on the surface of the half-melted armband. Along with the slight movement of his wrist and the nimble control of his fingers, the hard magic carving knife that was emitting a faint yellow light began to move and twist on the surface of the armband in an unnoticeable manner. The engraved lines and grooves were as thin as a mosquito's silk, but they were dense and continuous. An ordinary person would not be able to see it clearly without a powerful magnifying glass. However, Grim often had to carve a complete three-dimensional spell formation in an area the size of a grain of rice. In order to complete this difficult task, the blue light in Grim's black pupils shone like stars. The scanning and magnifying function of the AI chip had been activated to the extreme. The surface of the armband, which was originally only 30 centimeters wide, was magnified 3,000 times by the AI chip. In Grimm's eyes, it was now wide enough for him to splash a brush on it. However, correspondingly, the magic carving knife that was originally as thin as a cicada's wing was now as thick as a stone pillar, and it looked unusually clumsy. Grimm used his nimble fingers and wrist to control the magic carving knife, allowing it to quickly move along the surface of the armband according to the blue lines indicated by the AI chip. During this process, Grimm's wrist and fingers had to be consistent, otherwise the lines and grooves created by the carving knife would be of different depths, greatly affecting the function and effect of the finished product. However, the armband was currently at a terrifying temperature of 6,000 to 7,000 degrees. If not for Grimm being a Grade 2 fire magus, he would not have been able to accurately control the armband at such a close distance. Due to the magical properties of the fire-loath iron, it had an outstanding resistance to the scorching rays. Grimm could only choose to carve it manually. Fortunately, Grimm had nearly 100 years of experience in carving magic crystal cores, so he was able to complete his work without any mishap. Sighing lightly, Grimm carefully held the half-finished product in his left hand. He used his right hand to pick up a handful of golden quartz sand and scattered it on the surface of the armband. Following a series of golden flashes, most of the quartz sand was absorbed by the armband, causing its surface to turn a glistening yellow. It looked exceptionally dazzling. Quartz sand was a common material used to gather energy in the creation of magic tools. It could also be perfectly fused with the fire-loath iron, so there would not be any elemental repulsion between the two. After all this was done, Grimm finally relaxed and began to look at the half-finished flame emblem armband in his hand. Yes, this was not the final form of the Grade 2 flame emblem armband, but only a half-finished product. This was an exquisite armband made of dark red fire-repellent iron. The energy-absorbing substance in it resonated with the free elemental particles in the environment, causing a faint layer of bright red light film to linger around the surface of the armband. The AI chip had looked at tens of thousands of similar magic tools before coming up with the final design. The complicated spell formation engraved on it had been optimized and adjusted by the AI chip thousands of times. Looking at this exquisite work of art, Grimm's gaze was a little intoxicated. After fiddling with it for a long time, Grimm reluctantly placed it on the velvet tablecloth of the alchemy lab table. The base of the flame emblem armband had already been completed. All that was left was to completely melt the top-grade fire agate and use a special method to embed it into the densely packed grooves on the surface of the armband. Of course, before that, he still had to mix the fire dragon's blood into a suitable neutralizing agent. This was a rather laborious task. Based on his initial calculations, he would have to work hard for at least a month to complete the armband as soon as possible. After his previous exploration, Grimm understood that only by equipping the two pieces of the blazing flame monarch would his plan to explore the fire elemental plane be a little more assured. Grimm rubbed his temples as he calculated his daily schedule for the next month, a faint stabbing pain in his head. Even though the refinement process had only lasted a short 210 seconds, it had made him extremely nervous. The work of refining the base of the armband was also quite taxing on his mind. That was why at this moment, when Grimm had relaxed, he felt a little fatigue. He waved his hand to extinguish the magical flames on the alchemy table and cut off the magical energy supply from the wizard's pagoda to the alchemy table. Grimm could not be bothered to tidy up the alchemy tools and equipment. He yawned and rubbed his eyes as he walked out of the alchemy lab. It was time for a good rest. Snakebird Cliff. The afternoon sun shone through the lush foliage onto the grassland at the bottom of the cliff. 3 snake-bird hatchlings were frolicking on the verdant grass, while the other 2 hatchlings were lying in a grass nest, sleeping soundly. Most of the adult snake-bird hatchlings had gone out to look for food. Only the 2 female hatchlings remained on the cliff to guard the nest. They crouched lazily in the cave on the cliff, basking in the sun. They would occasionally poke their heads out to check on the hatchlings at the bottom of the cliff. In the innermost corner of the cave behind them, there were 7 or 8 white snake bird eggs with some light yellow spots covering the entire grass nest. There were also some beast bones that had been gnawed clean scattered around the nest. The area within a radius of 30 to 40 miles around the cliff was the hunting area of the snake bird beasts. The overly ferocious beasts and demons had long been chased further away by them. That was why, even though most of the adult snake bird beasts had gone out to hunt, the 2 female hatchlings that stayed behind were not worried about the safety of the snake bird cliff. A good chance, pushing aside the weeds in front of them, the apprentices of the Light of Shadow team peeked at the peaceful world with shifty eyes, their hearts bubbling with joy. The adult male snake bird beasts were not around, and there were only 2 female hatchlings at home. This was the best news they could have ever received. After waiting nearby for 2 days, the team of apprentices finally got to work without hesitation. Gomo 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 gomo, with a strange metallic sound, a little metal chick drilled its way out of the black forest with stiff steps, appearing on the green grass that had a radius of half a mile. The attention of the 3 frolicking snake bird hatchlings was immediately attracted. They stopped chasing and crouched down, curiously sizing up this strange fellow that they had never seen before. The little fellows did not sense any dangerous or frightening aura from it, so they did not immediately flee back to their nest. The little metal chick flapped its metal wings and swayed its golden body. It strolled around the edge of the grass, then suddenly shrieked and turned to flee back into the black forest. When the 3 hatchlings, who loved to kill, saw this, they immediately flapped their thin wings excitedly and chased after it. Just like that, the 3 big and 1 small quickly disappeared into the black forest. A moment later, the female hatchlings that had been lying peacefully at the entrance of the cliff's nest poked out its snake-like head again. This time, it was startled to find that the figures of the 3 hatchlings were missing from the grass. The female hatchlings immediately raised its neck and shrieked. The strange shriek contained the crispness of birds, but also the hissing noise of snakes. The mournful shriek immediately echoed around the high cliff for a long time. In the next moment, the 2 female snake bird hatchlings flew out of their nest and began to circle around the snake bird cliff, flying high and low, anxiously searching for the missing 3 hatchlings. After the 2 sleeping hatchlings woke up, they fled back to their nests in panic. The 2 female hatchlings landed on the grass, their snake-like heads flicking in and out their bright red tongues. Soon, they found the whereabouts of the 3 hatchlings in the air. Chapter 755. Before they had even traveled 2 miles, the female beast had already discovered traces of the 3 cubs. Near a pile of rocks in the woods, the 3 baby beasts were curled up together, with their heads hanging softly by their sides. Their calf-sized bodies didn't move at all. The female snake bird let out a high-pitched scream and swooped down from the top of the woods, breaking many ancient branches along the way. Its strange body, which was as fierce as a lion and a tiger, landed heavily in the bushes, leaving a deep ditch on the ground. The female snake bird was 2 times smaller than the male snake bird, and its feathers were much brighter. They might not be as strong as the male snake bird, but their flying speed and the fierceness of their venom were much better. The female snake bird jumped to the pile of rocks, and sensed the thriving life force of the baby beast once its 1.5-meter-long snake-shaped head touched the baby beast's body. The baby beast didn't die. The female snake bird finally calmed down. However, when it used its snake-like head to lightly touch the cub, a small round metal ball rolled out from under the cub's body, rolling all the way until it lightly bumped into its slender and long bird leg. What was this? The female snake bird bent its body and curiously looked at this strange object. Suddenly, tens of small holes appeared on the metal ball, from which a dense stream of green poisonous smoke spurted out. The poisonous smoke swallowed the female snake bird's body within a second. The female snake bird retreated in fear, but before it could get out of the range of the poisonous smoke, its strange half-snake half-bird body swayed inexplicably, and it staggered like a hangover drunkard. The poisonous smoke was indeed poisonous, and it was extremely poisonous. Unfortunately, facing a poisonous creature, this little bit of poison still couldn't kill it instantly. Swoosh! A strong wind roared, and a strong bald man jumped out from a bush nearby. The long blade held in his hand brought up a strong gust of wind and smashed on the female snake-bird's head. The female snake-bird was at most as powerful as a quasi-magus. Although its snake-shaped head was protected by dense snake scales, it still couldn't withstand such a fierce strike. If the bald brute hadn't used the back of his saber in order to capture the snake alive, his 9 points of strength would have been enough to decapitate the snake's head. With a dull thud, the scale-covered head of the female snake-bird was smashed into a bloody mess. Fortunately, its eyeballs were not directly blown out. The female snake-bird let out a shrill cry, swayed a few times, and finally fell down heavily. Before it fainted, the female snake-bird's pupils reflected a few hideous human figures surrounding it. "It's fallen, fallen!" Blanc pinched his throat and burst into wild laughter. The apprentices gathered around him all had a satisfied smile on their faces. "What do you say, Boss Pang? Should we stop now or continue?" "Of course we have to work harder." Pseudo-sorcerer Ponter's face was also filled with a sinister smile. "There are still 3 hours before nightfall, and those male beasts won't be back so early. We can take this opportunity to wipe out their nest. Don't forget, the most valuable part of the snake birds are their eggs. Then we have to be quick. We have to find a place to hide after searching the nest, in case those male beasts find us." Daxos, an apprentice with a blood-stained saber in his hand, urged in a muffled voice. "Let's go. Eek, you and Locke stay here and bring them back to their hiding place. We'll meet up with you after searching the nest." Ponter ordered decisively. "You guys be careful," Eek said affectionately. In the blink of an eye, the 3 of them disappeared into the forest. After looking for a while and waiting for the 3 of them to completely disappear, Eek retracted her gaze and sighed softly. "Let's hurry up and do it." "All right," Locke replied, and took out 7 or 8 pieces of metal magic equipment from his waist pouch. He then quickly assembled them in the clearing in the forest. In less than half a quarter of an hour, a 3-meter-tall miniature magical machine warrior with a somewhat thin body was basically formed. Locke laboriously pulled open the partition on the back of the magic mechanical warrior, and carefully inserted 3 sets of magic batteries into the card slot. Therefore, in the next second, with a noisy metal friction sound, the mini version of the magic machine warrior rose from the ground and stood tall in front of the 2 of them. Magic Mechanical Engineer JY001 reporting for duty, please give your instructions. In front of the tall magical machine warrior, the little goblin who was only a meter tall seemed even smaller. However, in front of his own magic mechanical creation, Locke was more energetic and confident than ever. "Don't just stand here like a fool. Hurry up and carry all the prey on my back. We're about to run." Locke jumped and gestured, and finally gave his first order. The entire body of the magic mechanical warrior was made of old and broken scrap metal. There was no trace of any high-level magic mechanical weapons on its body at all. The only thing that could be called a weapon was probably the pair of huge metal pincers. Although the arcane machine engineer's energy source came from the magical batteries, the steam valves, brake switches, suspension systems, as well as the dense gears and metal rods that kept turning and snapping could still be seen on its jumbled shell. After receiving the order, the magic mechanical engineer came to the female snake bird and the 3 cubs with heavy footsteps, and threw them on its shoulders one by one. Then, it quickly followed the little goblin and the female apprentice to the hidden place they arranged. Meanwhile, at Snakebird Cliff, the female snake-bird that was guarding the place soared in the sky with all its might. From time to time, it swooped down and used its terrifying venomous kiss and sharp bird claws to attack the intruders that suddenly appeared. Unfortunately, although it had the strength of a quasi-wizard, it was unarmed. It could only rely on its strong body to fight the 3 human apprentices who were armed to the teeth. Among the 3, there was a quasi-wizard of darkness who was not inferior to it. The female snake-bird's attacks were all blocked by Daxo, who was a body refinery apprentice. Daxo calmly blocked all the attacks from the female snake-bird, creating the best environment for his 2 companions to cast spells. The quasi-wizard Ponter's shadow arrows and Blank's armor-piercing crossbow both caused a lot of damage to the female snake-bird. In particular, the continuous shadow arrows had a very high probability of ignoring defense. Every time they hit the female snake-bird's body, a large part of its iron feathers and skin would be corroded, revealing the bright red flesh underneath. Therefore, after fighting for a quarter of an hour, the severely injured female snake-bird knew that it could not fight these intruders. It could only shriek mournfully and soar into the sky, escaping into the depths of the forest. Want to send a message? Stay right here. The quasi-wizard Ponter, who had been secretly accumulating his power, let out a hideous grin and rushed to catch up with the female snake-bird. The dark energy in his hand madly gathered into the shape of a dark spear. Then, as he threw it with great force, it quickly caught up with the female snake-bird and penetrated its body. The female snake-bird finally soared into the sky with a mournful cry. Daxo, go and bring its body back. Blanc, come into the nest with me. Seeing that victory was in sight, the 3 of them immediately split up and began to clean up the battle for the day. However, just as the 3 of them hurriedly searched the entire snake-bird cliff and packed up all the eggs and young snake-birds, a strange roar suddenly came from the distant sky. Damn it, those male snake-birds have returned to their nest. Let's go. Ponter's expression immediately changed. He did not have the time to carefully inspect the inside and outside of the nest. He whistled and fled with his 2 companions. There were as many as 17 adult snake-birds living in the snake-bird cliff. They had killed 2 of them, and there were still 15 left. Those were 15 quasi-magi level snake-bird beasts. Once they were trapped in the nest, no matter how well prepared they were and how well equipped they would not be able to withstand the attacks of the snake-bird. The 3 of them had killed their wives and stolen their eggs. If they were to fall into the hands of the snake-birds, their fates would be extremely miserable. Therefore, without needing Ponter to urge them, Daxo and Blanc immediately carried their huge bags and ran down the snake-bird cliff. The quasi-sorcerer Ponter stayed behind. He kept scattering strange yellow powder behind him as he retreated. This alchemy powder could effectively interfere with the residual smell in the air, rendering all the tracking monsters helpless. However, it was still a little dangerous to rely on this method to get rid of the snake-bird. Ponter quickly took out a magic wand and whispered a few words. A moment later, the goblin Locke, who had received the message, released his eyeball mech. It screeched and rushed into the sky, shooting randomly at the snake-birds that had just rushed over. This kind of attack power was only 11 degrees, and it could not kill the snake-birds at all. It could only make them scream a few times in pain. After attracting the attention of all the snake-birds, the eyeball mech turned around and fled without a care. Relying on the high-temperature flames behind it, it flew towards the periphery of the Black Forest. The snake-birds that had hurried back did not even have time to understand the situation before they were provoked by the eyeball mech. They shrieked and flapped their wings, disappearing into the forest in the blink of an eye. Seeing that the snake-birds had been lured away, the 3 of them finally relaxed and calmly returned to their hiding place with the loot they had plundered. The hideout was a deep pit that Locke commanded the magical mechanical engineers to dig in a clearing in the forest. The top was covered with wooden planks and green vines. The concealment effect was even better than the caves and crevices in the rock. Locke, you've done well. When we get back, you'll have a share of the loot this time. Ponter was obviously very satisfied with Locke's performance, and finally recognized him as a teammate for the first time. Thank you, boss. Thank you, boss. Chapter 756. The Fire Elemental Plane. It was a raging sea of fire. The boundary between heaven and earth was no longer clear, and the entire world had turned into a huge burning furnace. Since the fire elemental plane was a pure fire elemental world, it was naturally impossible for other elemental particles such as earth, water, and wind to exist. Hence, the basic outline of this world was made up of fire elementals that had temporarily changed their forms of existence. Materialized fire elementals could be seen everywhere in the fire elemental plane, and fire elementals were everywhere. However, if one were to look at the entire plane, the distribution of fire elementals was still uneven. The areas with thinner fire elementals were naturally the barren and desolate areas within the plane. Any area with a higher concentration of fire elementals would be directly occupied by powerful fire elemental creatures. Although fire elemental creatures had no desires, and did not have the treacherous thoughts of other intelligent races that fought for power, their instincts to become stronger still dominated their simple yet violent minds. It was universally acknowledged that fire elemental creatures were the most violent of the four major elemental creatures, and they were also the branch that loved to fight the most. The Sea of Ashes was also a relatively well-known place in the fire elemental plane. Nearly 10,000 miles of the plane had been burned into nothingness by a terrifying flame, and the areas adjacent to the Sea of Ashes naturally became the ideal residences for fire elementals. And the one that resided in the depths of the Sea of Ashes was the level 5 flame monarch Gromus. At this moment, at the edge of the Sea of Ashes, a 5-meter-tall lava humanoid swayed its heavy body as it arrived in front of an old and unadorned altar. As soon as it stopped, 5 mysterious guards surrounded by greenish-white flames suddenly appeared around the altar steps that were originally empty. Halt! This is the chamber of the flame monarch Gromus. State your purpose for coming here. These mysterious flame monarch Gromus were less than 3 meters tall, and did not look particularly impressive. They were far less burly than the 5-meter-tall lava firemen in front of them, but the difference in strength between them was like heaven and earth. The lava fireman was only level 2, but these 5 mysterious flame monarch Gromus had the terrifying strength of level 3. If they were to really fight, the flame guards would not even need 5 seconds to tear this big guy who did not know how to conceal his aura into pieces. Esteemed flame guards, I'm one of the lords under the great flame monarch grooms. I'm here to seek an audience with you, the magma fireman said in a low, muffled voice. You're here on the lord's orders? Wait a moment, we will personally verify it with my lord. After saying that, the leading flame spirit turned around and knelt in front of the ancient altar. It began to silently communicate with a powerful existence far away. A moment later, Flame Spirit stood up and said in a deep voice, I've communicated with Sir. You're telling the truth. You can go in now. Immediately after, the 5 flame spirits stood on the 5 nodes that extended from the ancient altar and channeled their energy into the altar. The earth trembled slightly. Not far behind the altar, the turbulent sea of fire was suddenly pushed aside by a strange force, revealing a clear area that led straight to the depths of the sea of fire. Go in. Remember, don't touch these flames, or else. Although the flame spirit did not finish its sentence, the hidden meaning was obvious. The lava man responded in a muffled voice and continued to move its huge body into the depths of the Sea of Ashes along the strange fire passage. It was as if a layer of transparent glass had been installed around it. No matter how fierce the raging sea of fire was, it could not affect the magma fireman as it walked in the passage. On the contrary, through the transparent passage, the magma fireman could vaguely sense the terror and power of the sea of fire outside. Although it had the strength of a Grade 2 magma fireman and had shockingly high fire resistance, it would not last more than 15 minutes in the sea of fire before being burned to a pile of ashes. It was no wonder that most of the laws in the fire elemental plane would become chaotic and blurry in this place. The sea of fire passage was very, very long, The magma fireman walked for 3 days and 3 nights before reaching the other end of the passage. As soon as it emerged, it was completely stunned by the scene before it. In the center of the Sea of Ashes was a huge, majestic, and strange palace. And this palace was floating above the sea of fire just like that, like a peerless ferocious beast that had gathered here, with its mouth wide open, quietly waiting for the lowly prey to deliver itself to its doorstep. The main hall was supported by hundreds of thick stone pillars. Each of them was so thick that it would take 5 people to wrap their arms around it. Golden flames curled around the pillars, and strange flame runes would appear on the pillars from time to time. A wooden palace and stone pillars. The flame monarch style had indeed far exceeded the limits of the magma fireman's imagination. In the fire elemental plane, it was difficult for any external matter to exist for a long time. Therefore, although the wood and stones seemed inconspicuous, they were definitely rare treasures that the flame monarch had obtained from another plane. Otherwise, they would have long been burned to ashes in this terrifying place. Even the fire elemental creatures could not withstand the terror of the Sea of Ashes. Under the feet of the magma fireman was a small stone platform that was less than 100 meters wide. In the center of the stone platform, there was also a strange rune formation similar to the one on the altar outside. The stone platform and the tall palace in the distance were connected by a floating stone path that was less than 10 meters wide. As far as the eye could see, there were as many as 20 to 30 stone platforms that were similar to the one under his feet in this vast space. It was conceivable that these stone platforms were connected to different areas in the periphery of the Sea of Ashes. Only with the approval of the Flame Monarch Gromes could the Lords of the Flames have the chance to enter the Sea of Ashes and personally meet this legendary great existence. The magma fireman calmed its emotions and walked along the path in front of it towards the palace in the distance. From afar, this strange palace did not seem big. However, once it arrived at the spacious and grand square in front of the palace, the 5-meter-tall magma fireman instantly became a behemoth. It was like a bean sprout beside it, becoming inconspicuous. At this point, it did not dare to take another step forward. The magma fireman knelt on one knee and shouted with a deep voice, "Mighty Lord Gromes, your loyal servant Arts has come to seek an audience with you." A moment later, a deep and sonorous voice suddenly reverberated in the world. "Rise!" This figure might not have been loud, but as it circled around the strange palace, it absorbed the abundant fire energy and became so majestic that it caused one's heart to palpitate. "Mighty Lord Gromes, do you have any instructions for summoning me here?" This was the nature of the fire elemental creatures. They did not have so many superfluous formalities, nor did they have so many lies. Even someone as lowly as the magma fireman went straight to the point and asked for the master of the palace. "Arts, I need you to kill a magus." Hearing his master's order, the magma fireman Arts knelt on one knee again without hesitation, using a fiery tone to express his loyalty. "Mighty Lord Gromes, as long as you tell me the name of this magus, I will lead the Flame Corps to kill him. There's no need for you to go through so much trouble this time. All you need to do is stay in your territory, and there will naturally be a human magus who will assassinate you. His strength is only at rank 2. Arthes raised his head. His giant face, which was made of lava and flames, was filled with confusion. "You don't need to know why. All you need to do is stay in your territory obediently and kill the human magus who trespasses into your territory. If you complete your mission, I will allow you to move from Fiery Dust Canyon to the Pillar of Ashes." The moment the sonorous voice left his mouth, Arts immediately revealed an expression of ecstasy. The Pillar of Ashes was less than 300 miles away from the Sea of Ashes. It was an enviable place where the fire elemental energy gathered. Usually, only a rank 3 or 4 Lord of the Flames would have the chance to occupy such a territory and become an illustrious lord with real power. "Understood, my master." Your loyal servant, Arts, will definitely complete the task successfully. Now that you understand, leave. Remember, I'm waiting for your good news. As the sonorous voice gradually disappeared, the lava-fiery Arts bowed once more before turning around and slowly walking back the way he had come. After the lava-fiery man's figure completely disappeared from this strange world, the flame sovereign King Groom's voice sounded once more. How is it? I've already delegated the task that you've given me. What about the thing that you promised me? A moment later, a strange, illusory female voice sounded in the air. When have I, Medusa, ever gone back on my word? Fire monster, the contract that we signed stated that I would only tell you the location of that item after the mission was completed. Now, the contract has not been completed, and you still have the cheek to ask me for something? Hee. Old witch, do you think that there will be any unforeseen circumstances? He's just a rank 2 magus. If he dares to trespass into our world, my subordinates will naturally find him and crush him to death. Do you really think that a rank 2 magus can kill my subordinate, a rank 2 Lord of the Flames? Ha ha. If that's the case, you're really too childish. I don't care what methods you use. In short, you have to complete the task that I've given you. Otherwise, don't even think of getting the whereabouts of that item from me. Alright. It's really troublesome to deal with you old witches. I'll take a nap first. Anyway, it's only a dozen or so years, and a short nap will pass. When the time comes, don't forget your promise. With that, the flame sovereign king's voice finally fell silent, and the cold female voice completely disappeared. Chapter 757. Oblivious to the happenings in another world, Grimm continued to work day and night in the blazing flame monarch. The creation of the armband was a meticulous process that required constant refinement of alchemy technique. Even with the help of the AI chip, Grimm's progress was still slow. Fortunately, Grimm had sufficient patience and resources, allowing him to advance amidst constant failures. Bit by bit, he prepared all the materials he needed to create the armband. The armband was the first part to be completed. However, it alone could not be considered as a level 2 fire-attributed wizard artifact. Therefore, after soaking the bracelet in the fire dragon's blood for 10 days, Grimm finally pushed the process to the last step of the refinement. He mixed the liquid from the fire agate with a neutralizing agent mixed with fire dragon blood, then poured it into the rune grooves that had been engraved on the armband. Only after all of these rune grooves were connected could the three-dimensional rune arrays engraved on the entire armband construct a complete energy circulation system. At that time, the combination of metal, runes and energy would truly become a grade 2 magic tool that would be of great help to Grimm. Before that, however, they were just a pile of rare materials. In order to complete his second set of the Blazing Flame Monarch set as soon as possible, apart from eating, meditating, and flipping through ancient texts, Grimm spent almost all of his time immersed in his magic laboratory. Of course, if it weren't for the fact that eating and drinking every day would bring great benefits to his body, and if he didn't need to meditate to recover his mental strength, perhaps Grimm would have skipped out on eating and meditating every day. Not only did the immense pressure from the outside not crush his confidence and fighting spirit, it even managed to incite the stubbornness and madness hidden in the depths of Grimm's heart. The more his enemies wanted him to collapse, the more he wanted to stand straight. The more his enemies wanted to kill him, the more he wanted to live brilliantly. Grimm seemed to have abandoned all external distractions, wholeheartedly immersing himself in the creation and improvement of the armband with the flame emblem. Grimm did not have a master when it came to alchemy, and it was impossible for him to have one. With just a beginner's guide to creating puppets, Grimm had relied on the AI chip's assistance to forge himself into an underground alchemist. Of course, as an underground master alchemist, he was a little too partial. His expertise was in the creation of magical puppets and the refinement of rare items. As for the other categories and fields, Grim didn't know anything about them. His knowledge couldn't even compare to that of an apprentice alchemist. However, perhaps it was because of this stubbornness and madness that Grim was able to improve by leaps and bounds in the field of wondrous item-making. The moment the flame emblem was forged, Grim's title as a master alchemist was fully justified. Sorcerer Calendar, July 25, 32856. On the 78th day after Grim signed the contract, which was also the 31st day after he returned from his first exploration of the fire elemental plane, the long-awaited flame emblem armband was finally completed. When the two pieces of the blazing flame monarch linked with his soul, a strange spiritual resonance appeared. He didn't activate any spells, nor did he intentionally activate his life force. A ring of flames that only he could see started to linger around his body. Elementary fire immunity. Unlike his high fire resistance, Grim obtained elementary fire immunity this time. Fire immunity was different from fire resistance. They were two completely different concepts. Fire resistance was the strength of a lifeform's life force to resist fire elemental attack. No matter how high a lifeform's fire resistance was, it would only be able to resist the damage of fire elemental attacks. However, some variations of fire elemental attacks would still take some damage. For example, the physical damage from fire arrows, the explosive shock waves from lava fireballs, and the burning of magma, but fire immunity was a completely different story. Fire immunity meant that a life form would no longer be harmed by any flames or variations of fire elemental attack. Although Grim only obtained elementary fire immunity and could only resist some low-ranked fire elemental attacks, it was still a great help to him. After all, in the fire elemental plane, most of the creatures were mindless low-ranked fire elementals that only knew how to wander around aimlessly. Now that Grim had elementary fire immunity, he no longer had to worry about being attacked by them. In this way, the Lord of the Flames' large army of fire elementals became useless. Grim only needed to be careful of the high-ranked fire elementals. Hence, on the second day after his successful refinement, Grim had a good night's sleep to replenish his spiritual force. He then opened the flame gate and sneaked into the fire elemental plane with shifty eyes. It had to be said that the stubbornness of fire elemental creatures was truly admirable. Just as Grim came out of the flaming gate, he was engulfed by a dozen or so fireballs that flew towards him. Ferocious flames, berserk shockwaves, and extremely high temperatures that could vaporize steel. In an instant, Grim's vision was engulfed by the terrifying flames, and the damage from the flames projected by the AI chip in his mind increased exponentially. In the blink of an eye, the temperature had risen to 536 degrees. This intensity was enough to kill most rank 1 magi in a direct confrontation. Of course, if they were caught off guard, even rank 2 magi would be at a disadvantage. However, when the surging flames gradually subsided, the rank 1 flame spirits surrounding the flame gate were shocked to discover that their target, the weak human in crimson robes, was still standing in place. Not only was he unharmed, even the crimson robes that were enveloped by the strange flames were undamaged. At this moment, he was looking around with an unfriendly expression. His black eyes were filled with unconcealable rage. Damn it, this bunch of stubborn flame spirits had been waiting for him for 31 days. This was a kind of stubbornness that could cause one to collapse. Grim looked around and immediately noticed that the location of the flaming gate was not the same as the last time. There were no signs of grasslands in the surroundings, which meant that the flame gate was at least 100 miles away from the previous location. The only possibility for the flame spirits to be able to wait for him so far away was that they were monitoring all the weak points in this plane. With a trace of fury from being ambushed, and a desire to test out the might of the blazing flame monarch's two-piece set, Grim let out a soft roar. His 2 large hands that were outside his robes instantly ignited with scorching flames that soared into the skies. Flaming hands. If this apprentice-level sorcery was performed by a sorcerer apprentice, It would only be able to spread the flames half a meter away at most. However, when Grimm, a rank 2 fire magus, cast the same spell, the flames would reach 5 to 6 meters high. The 11 rank 1 flame spirits, who were originally worried that the human magus would cast some powerful spell, retreated and prepared themselves for battle. Now that they saw that the human magus had cast such a simple and crude fire spell, the flame spirits immediately relaxed and pounced forward. As rank 1 flame spirits of the fire elemental plane, their fire resistance was shockingly high. Hence, there was no need to worry that the low-ranked fire spell of this human magus would harm their bodies. Instead, they could take advantage of the time when the human magus was casting the spell to attack him in close combat. After all, this human magus had just displayed a terrifying fire resistance ability. It seemed that long-range fire attacks were ineffective against him, so the flame spirits could only rely on close combat. However, just as the 11 flame spirits rushed to Grimm's side, the blazing flames in Grimm's hands suddenly trembled and distorted. The misty flames condensed into resplendent spears that were as red as crystals. "Go!" Grimm roared, and the flames in his palms were pushed to the limit. 11 crystal spears that were as hard as steel extended from his hands and pierced through the chests of the 11 flame spirits, piercing through the cores of the flames within. The 11 rank 1 flame spirits trembled and froze on the spot, unable to move. As Grimm clenched his fists, the 11 crystal spears instantly dissipated into incorporeal flames and returned to Grimm's palms. The bodies of the 11 flame spirits trembled more and more violently. Finally, the shattered cores could no longer restrain the flames. Pung pung pung. Small-scale sacrificial explosions erupted one after another, engulfing the scene in terrifying flames. Of course, this kind of self-destruction caused by the annihilation of their souls was countless times less powerful than their conscious self-destruction. Hence, Grimm stood rooted to the ground and treated it as a gust of hot wind, not even bothering to dodge. He hoped that the flame spirits did not spread the news in time. Grimm muttered to himself after dealing with these reckless fellows. However, Grimm knew that this was just wishful thinking. The moment he had teleported here, the flame spirits had already transmitted the situation back to their nest. He could not stay here for long. Otherwise, he might really encounter those terrifying rank 2 and 3 flame spirits. With Grimm's current strength, he had an 80% chance of winning against a rank 2 flame spirit. If he had to face 2 of them, his chances would plummet to 30%. If there were 3, Grimm would definitely run as far as he could. Otherwise, he would definitely be chased to death. As for the rank 3 flame spirits, Grimm could only order the Balrog to self-destruct to buy himself some time to escape. He had no other way to deal with them. However, the only good thing was that rank 3 creatures in the fire elemental plane were as rare as rank 3 sorcerers in the Magus world. It was impossible to encounter one so easily. Otherwise, Grimm would never have dared to come to this world where death was certain. Chapter 758. The fire elemental plane was indeed the world of fire creatures. A pure fire magus like Grimm could also enjoy a huge boost to his fire elemental abilities. It was a pity that the creatures here had high fire resistance. Otherwise, Grimm would have treated this exploration as a pleasant trip to another world to kill monsters. In order to reduce the chances of him being discovered, Grimm could only complete the transformation of his flames and reveal his body of fire. In the fire elemental plane, there were many low-ranked fire elementals like him that wandered around aimlessly. When faced with intruders who had crossed the border, they would roar and charge forward like madmen, shouting, "Destroy the intruders! Let the flames warm your body and mind!" and other messy slogans. If there was a disagreement, they would immediately start a war. Once they realized that the enemy was too strong for them to handle, they would self-destruct without hesitation. At Grimm's current level, apprentice or Tier 1 fire elementals could be killed with a wave of his hand. However, fighting with them would always leave some traces, which would undoubtedly lead his pursuers to his footsteps. So, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Grim disguised himself as a Grade 1 fire person and carefully advanced in a certain direction. Grim obviously did not idle along the way. His newly acquired flame-shaping ability had become a toy that he was very interested in, and he was having a lot of fun playing with it. This was the strange ability that the flame emblem on his arm had bestowed upon him. When he condensed magical flames on his hands, the flames could freely change shape according to his will. After countless attempts and experiments, Grim had successfully simulated over 100 different weapons such as blades, swords, claws, shields, spears, whips, bows, and so on. According to the AI chip's data, this flame-shaping ability could be roughly split into two types: short-range and mid-range. The short-range weapons could simulate blades, swords, war hammers, claws, shields, and so on. The quality of the weapons and armors could be compared to Grade 1 Magus equipment. The mid-range weapons could simulate a flaming whip or a flaming bow, and when paired with arrows formed from flames, they had a certain degree of mid-range attack power. With so many new tricks, if he were to encounter an enemy and use them randomly, there would definitely be problems. That was why Grim had the AI chip gather enough basic data and began to repeatedly deduce the forms of the weapons that were most useful in battle, preparing to solidify them into one of his battle abilities. Moreover, the flame emblem and ash boots had already resonated with his soul. This way, other than in his human form, he could continue to enjoy the benefits of the two Tier 2 magic tools even after transforming into a Balrog. The ash boots gave Grim +1 spirit, while the flame emblem gave Grim +1 strength. Moreover, this kind of data bonus was not something that the origin contract could restrain. Therefore, along the way, Grim explored the strange scenery of the fire elemental plane while experimenting with his flame-shaping ability. 2 clusters of bright yellow flames burned in his palms, changing into various weapons from time to time. As though he had discovered a brand new world, Grim was able to perform all sorts of tricks with the simple flame molding technique. At one moment, it would turn into a dazzling golden shield, then into a flaming whip that could be used at close or far range, then into a set of half-body armor and claws, then into a flaming bow. Of course, besides these basic weapon forms, Grim was playful and even controlled the flames to transform into the form of a magic cannon. It was a pity that the runic spell formation at the core of the cannon consumed too much spirit. Although Grim's magic cannon had a cool appearance, it could only fire the simplest energy fireball. AI chip, is it possible to solidify a powerful long-range weapon form? After some thought, Grim searched through the AI chip's database. Magic archer form, using the flame molding technique to simulate the shape of an energy cannon. The host's right arm will be the cannon's carrier, and the host's right shoulder will be the turret's support. Attack will be an energy fireball. Estimated attack strength of 170 to 210 degrees. Attack rate of 3 shots every 2 seconds. Following the AI chip's instructions, a 3-dimensional image began to rotate in Grim's mind. The main body of the image was still Grim's Balrog form, but his arms were no longer solitary lava hands. Instead, they were covered by 2 energy cannons that flickered with silver light. The cannons snaked up Grim's arms, and when they reached his shoulders, they transformed into a strange pauldron. In the past, Grim liked to control large areas of the battlefield, turning his field of vision into a sea of flames at every turn. However, this method of battle was a little lacking in small-scale battles. Due to the dispersion of the area of effect spells, the damage dealt to opponents of the same rank was obviously insufficient. Now that he had the flame molding ability, he could condense the flames in his palms into the shape of an energy cannon and quickly transform into the magic archer form. In this way, although his attack method had become a single energy fireball, the high attack speed and attack power of up to 200 degrees was still a good way to defeat the enemy. How long will it take to complete the design of the magic archer form? B. Basic knowledge and spell theory have been prepared. Design and optimization of the relevant battle modules will take 37 hours 56 minutes 33 seconds. Let's begin now. B. Receiving host's orders. Initial construction of the Magic Archer form model. As the AI chip began to calculate the huge amount of data and optimize the model, Grimm felt the spiritual force in his mind drain away rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had lost 5 points of spiritual force. If not for his spiritual force reaching 26 points after advancing to Grade 2, and the 1 point from the Ashes boots, even he would not have been able to endure such an intense drain on his spiritual force. Grimm immediately stopped and looked around. Very quickly, he found a small pool of fire that was suitable for him to quickly recover his spiritual force. He then rushed over without hesitation. As for the original owner of this small pool of fire, a high-grade Grade 1 fire djinn, he had intentionally or unintentionally ignored it. A moment later, the high-grade Grade 1 fire djinn's core was dug out by Grimm, and it was destroyed in a sea of flames that filled the sky. Grimm, on the other hand, jumped into the blazing pool and began to take a bath. Mortals in this world could only enjoy hot springs, and only creatures of the fire elemental plane could enjoy this unique fire bath. Just as Grimm was leisurely enjoying his fiery life, in another part of the Dustfire Canyon, a large number of flaming creatures under the command of the Lord of the Flames, Arteezes, were searching for traces of an intruder. However, the Black Mountain that Grimm had appeared in was tens of thousands of miles away from Arteezes' Dustfire Canyon. Hence, even if Arteezes turned his territory upside down, he would not be able to find any traces of Grimm. However, the Grade 2 Lord of the Flames, Arteezes, was not an incompetent person. After a fruitless search, he immediately gave up and began to play a tight-knit game. He even called out to the nearby Lords of the Flames, setting up an inescapable net around the entire Dustfire Canyon. This way, no matter which direction the human magus tried to sneak into his territory, he would not be able to hide from the scouts he had set up. His only regret was that he knew too little about the human magus who was about to assassinate him. This made it difficult for him to plan an ambush based on the enemy's personality and habit. However, when he thought about the 7,000 flame core in his territory, Arteezes could not help but calm down. Now, he just had to wait for the human magus to ambush him. It had to be said that the fire elemental plane was the most suitable plane for fire magi to train and explore. Once he entered the plane, the heart of flames in Grimm's chest became exceptionally powerful. The frequency at which it released fire energy was also much faster than in the outside world. More importantly, the plane's consciousness seemed to be willing to open its heart to every fire magus, allowing them to live freely in this strange world. Hence, if it was possible in the future, Grimm felt that it would be better for him to set up a spell laboratory here. If he could not stay in the magus world any longer, it would not be a bad idea to turn this place into a second plane. This was a vast, fiery plane. The dry and cracked ground was filled with crisscrossing cracks and canyons. Terrifying air currents with scorching temperatures shot out of the ground from time to time, forming scarlet pillars of fire that were hundreds of meters tall. The temperature of these fire pillars was over 6,000 degrees Celsius. Even native fire creatures wouldn't be able to withstand such terrifying heat if they were hit. They would be incinerated into ashes by the surging flames and the fire pillars. Then, as the fire pillars continued to rise from the ground, there would occasionally be some formed fire crystals or strange magical gems mixed in the flames and ejecting from time to time. These things were undoubtedly a great supplement for the low-ranked fire magi. Hence, even though this place was extremely dangerous, there were still many fire magi wandering around in search of them. From afar, one could see fire spirits, fire elementals, firemen, and fire elementals roaming around in the vast plain, while Grimm was hiding here and there. There was an unprecedented eruption here. Countless rare flame materials were spewed out from the ground, raining gemstones on the flaming plains. This was the first time Grimm had seen such a scene in the fire elemental plane, and he could not help but be attracted to it. Fire agate, fire crystals, fire stones, fire cores, lava fragments, and countless other strange fire magi. Grimm stood outside the sea of fire and silently scanned the entire flaming plain. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed as he was attracted by a strange gem that was rolling in the sky. Chapter 759. Flame Essence. It was a strange elemental essence born from pure flames. If he absorbed it into his body, it would definitely increase his elemental affinity with magical flames. Therefore, the moment Grimm discovered the flame essence, he activated Flame Leap and charged into the flaming plains, heading towards the location of the gem that was 3 kilometers away. Over there were already 3 low-level fire spirits who joined the fight for it. Fire spirits were actually low-grade fire creatures. They did not even have enough energy to solidify their form, so they looked like a ball of flame that constantly twisted and deformed. However, one could vaguely see a human-like face in the middle of the flame. Their attack methods were explosive fireball, flame blast beam, and ignite. With their strength, it would be extremely dangerous for unarmed mortals if they were thrown into any material plane. A basic Grade 1 fire spirit could easily burn down a human village. However, in the fire elemental plane, most of the fire spirits' attacks were not a threat to other fire creatures. Hence, after their attacks were greatly reduced, their weak defenses were undoubtedly obvious. From Grimm's perspective, the flame essence was like a crystal-clear elemental gem, lying quietly at the edge of an underground crack. The 3 low-level fire spirits surrounded the flame essence like mad dogs, attacking each other desperately. They looked fierce and determined to win. For a moment, elemental fireballs and flame blasts clashed wildly in the sea of flames. Although the fire spirits resisted most of the fire damage, they could not prevent their flaming bodies from being destroyed by the opponent's frenzied attack. 3 basic Grade 1 fire spirits could not even solidify their form, yet they dared to covet such a precious treasure. Grimm roared inwardly as he used Flame Leap to quickly approach the battlefield. Perhaps it was because the 3 Tier 1 fire spirits had sensed Grimm's flaming form approaching them, but they could not help but grow anxious. Even in the fire elemental plane where elemental creatures ran rampant, those that could evolve into a complete body were not to be trifled with. Hence, when the 3 fire spirits saw Grimm's human body wrapped in flames, they knew that a powerful enemy had arrived. If it wasn't for the flame spirit, the 3 of them would have fled the moment they saw Grimm. Unfortunately, the desire to evolve and grow stronger in the depths of their consciousness was firmly controlling their bodies, causing them to linger around the battlefield, unwilling to leave. In just 17 seconds, Grimm had crossed the distance of 3 kilometers and appeared on the battlefield. With a flame jump, he appeared behind the 2 fire spirits who were fighting each other. The flames in his hand instantly turned into a giant beheading sword with terrifying sawteeth, and he slashed the bodies of the 2 fire spirits. Seeing that the situation was not good, the remaining fire spirit finally thought of turning around to escape. Unfortunately, as soon as it turned around, a flaming whip with star fire came back from the air, shattering its unstable flame body. After clearing the battlefield in an instant, Grimm, who had transformed into a tall man, headed straight for the flame essence with satisfaction. But when he was less than 5 steps away from the flame essence, a strange flame came from the side and snatched the flame essence away before Grimm could. Who? Grimm's heart skipped a beat. His face that was made of flames suddenly turned to look at the awe-inspiring tall flame figure that was walking out of a pillar of fire. A Grade 2 fire elemental elder. In just a few seconds, the AI chip had already scanned the opponent's basic stats, and Grimm's expression gradually darkened. Fire Elemental Elder, Grade 2 Elemental Creature, Stats. Strength 14, Vitality 16, Agility 8, Spirit 23. It had to be said that the Fire Elemental Elder, who had mastered most fire spells, had almost reached the level of elementary fire immunity. In addition, its body was 5 meters tall, and the fire elemental energy in its body was condensed to the extreme. Although it did not have a hard shell, its flaming body was more durable than other fire elemental creatures. The Fire Elemental Elder, who was 2 heads taller than Grim, absorbed the flame essence into his palm. He was glaring at Grim with a pair of ferocious burning eyes. He looked like he would start a fight if there was any disagreement. Both of them were Grade 2 creatures, and their combat strength was about the same. If not for the temptation of the flame essence, they would not have easily become enemies. Grim hesitated for a moment. As if intimidated by the Fire Elemental Elder's ferocious appearance, he silently took a step back and assumed a stance of giving up. Seeing this, the Grade 2 Fire Elemental Elder was very satisfied. It grabbed the flame essence and turned around, looking for a suitable place to absorb it as soon as possible. However, just as the Fire Elemental Elder turned around, Grim, who had transformed into a tall, flaming face, raised his head, and a cold, ruthless glint flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, Grim raised his right hand and pointed at the Fire Elemental Elder. A flame cage made of pure flames rose from the ground and imprisoned the Fire Elemental Elder. With the Fire Elemental Elder's strength, such a Tier 1 binding spell could not restrict its movements. It swung its fist furiously and shattered the flame cage into a shower of sparks with its giant flaming fist. However, no matter how fast it escaped, it could not avoid being imprisoned for a second. To an evil wizard who was adept at seizing opportunities, 1 second was more than enough for him to do many things. First, Grim used 3 lava fireballs to clear a path. While the Fire Elemental Elder was busy dodging, he used Flame Jump and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind the Fire Elemental Elder. The flames in his hand instantly condensed into the shape of a greatsword, and he ruthlessly stabbed at the Fire Elemental Elder's core. The Fire Elemental Elder bellowed angrily and used Flame Blast to repel the 3 lava fireballs. He then turned around and used a ring of resistance to push Grim away. When Grim staggered back, the Fire Elemental Elder grabbed and threw a meteor from the sky, smashing into the illusion Grim had left behind. Pung! The meteor fell, and the earth trembled. The Burning Man fantasy film shattered and scattered into a cloud of fireflies, and the burning ground under his feet smashed out a huge pit of fire more than a meter deep. The bottom of the fire pit was densely packed with spiderweb-like cracks, and the sparks that splashed in all directions burned the surroundings red. However, amidst the raging flames, the Fire Elemental Elder could not find Grim's figure. The Fire Elemental Elder was slightly startled. He grabbed the flame essence with his left hand and quickly formed a rune in the air with his right hand. After a while, the rune disappeared, and a strange flame ripple quickly spread in all directions with the Fire Elemental Elder at the center. When it came into contact with the strange flame ripple, the burning flames were instantly extinguished, and the entire battlefield was cleared up. When the flame ripple reached 10 meters to the right of the Fire Elemental Elder, the empty space suddenly distorted, and the Fire Elemental Elder in Grim's form staggered and flew out. TSK, TSK, TSK. Stupid kid, you actually want to use this kind of flame invisibility method to sneak attack this lord, just wait to suffer. While roaring arrogantly, the Fire Elemental Elder waved his arms and quickly condensed a meteor fireball, smashing towards the Fire Elemental Elder's face. While smashing, the Fire Elemental Elder felt strange. Why did the size and body of the Fire Elemental Elder change after not seeing it for a while? However, before he could finish thinking about it, the flames behind him parted, and another Fire Elemental Elder came out. The Fire Elemental Elder viciously stabbed the Fire Elemental Elder with its serrated flame greatsword. Damn it, why are there 2 of them? For a moment, the Fire Elemental Elder thought that the enemy had used the fire projection method to create a fake person to distract his attention. However, when its mental strength swept past the two tall men, the Fire Elemental Elder's body trembled, and it was so frightened that it almost threw away the flame essence. Unexpectedly, both of them were real, and they were both grade 2. In just a moment's daze, the Fire Elemental Elder lost his chance to escape. The two grade 2 Fire Elemental Elders stuck to the Fire Elemental Elder's body, using their rapid instant fireballs to bombard the Fire Elemental Elder's body. No matter how solid the Fire Elemental Elder's flaming body was, under the repeated attacks of two Fire Elemental Elders of the same rank, it began to waver. The Fire Elemental Elder, who was battered and battered, roared angrily. He began to focus all his attacks on one of the Fire Elemental Elders. He clearly sensed that this Fire Elemental Elder was his real enemy, and the other Fire Elemental Elder was only a flame puppet summoned by the Fire Elemental Elder. Seeing that the Fire Elemental Elder had seen through his deceit, Grim immediately turned around and fled. 2 against 1, today's victory was assured. There was no need to fight to the death with that idiot. Hence, Grim turned around and fled, using guerrilla tactics to delay the Fire Elemental Elder's attacks, while the terrifying Flame Demon chased after the Fire Elemental Elder and bombarded it. Just like that, the three of them chased each other in the middle of the burning steppe. Under the pursuit of the Fire Elemental Elder, Grim ran quickly. Wherever his crimson feet passed, an eye-catching trail of flames would be silently ignited. The Fire Elemental Elder only lowered his head to take a look, but he didn't care. A burning trail that only dealt 60 degrees of fire damage per second was nothing to the Fire Elemental Elder, who already had elementary fire immunity. Therefore, he didn't think too much and stood in the middle of the burning trail to fight Grim. Seeing that the enemy had fallen for his trap, Grim laughed and shouted, "Cold flames!" As the magic flames quickly turned into cold flames with freezing effects, the Fire Elemental Elder, who was running quickly just now, actually found it difficult to move in the greenish-white flames. Take advantage of its weakness. Chapter 760. The Fire Elemental Elder was dead. A grade 2 Fire Elemental Elder had died under the frenzied bombardment of Grim and the Balrog. In the sorcerer world, any grade 2 sorcerer had a large number of life-saving spells and abilities. It was impossible for them to die so easily. If a grade 2 sorcerer really died on the battlefield, it would immediately cause a sensation in the region. However, in this fire elemental plane filled with flame creatures, the death of a grade 2 creature was as common as slaughtering a chicken in a farmer's house. Even the flame creatures roaming around in the distance did not care about what happened here, let alone those who jumped out to avenge the Fire Elemental Elder. As long as they were not affected by Grim's slaughter, they would continue to roam the burning steppes leisurely, searching for items that could help them evolve. Of course, this was also a sign that their intelligence had not evolved to the point of possessing complete intelligence. Otherwise, they would have fled as far as they could when faced with two ferocious grade 2 sorcerers fighting to the death here. After the cruel battle of flames ended, Grim had two bright red crystals in his hands. One was a sparkling, translucent, fiery red crystal with a gentle appearance. Only by holding it in front of his eyes and examining it closely could he see a strange flame slowly swimming within the solid crystal. As for the other one, it was a heart-shaped gem that was burning with blazing flames. One could feel a wave of scorching heat coming from it. As expected of elemental creatures, even though they had reached grade 2, they were still so poor that it made people want to cry. Grim had gone to great lengths to kill the Tier 2 Fire Elemental Elder. In the end, he had only obtained a Tier 2 Flame Core. If he had not killed the Fire Elemental Elder in an instant and forced it to self-destruct, Grim would not have been able to obtain anything. If such a thing had happened, Grim would not have been able to cry even if he wanted to. The fire elemental plane was a large plane, and the number of flame creatures in it could be counted in the trillions. Moreover, unlike other intelligent races, flame creatures did not have a limited lifespan. Strictly speaking, they were a special species with a long lifespan. However, most of the elemental creatures were still mindless, ignorant elemental bodies that did not even have spiritual consciousness. They did not have the concept of good and evil that the mortal races knew, but this did not mean that they did not have intelligence. In fact, the wisdom of the strongest among them far surpassed that of mortals, perhaps even surpassing that of dragons, because they had existed for far longer and more ancient than dragons. In the elemental plane, even though the elemental creatures were all extremely lazy and didn't have any outstanding talent in cultivation, they relied on their massive numbers at the bottom of the hierarchy and the accumulation of strength over time to accumulate the number of powerhouses that most material planes feared. Otherwise, Grimm would not have come across a Tier 2 fire elemental elder roaming freely in this desolate land. However, the other party was clearly not perceptive and lacked an instinctive sense of danger. For a flame essence, he had actually clashed head-on with Grimm, a creature of the same rank. As a result, not only did Grimm obtain the flame essence, but he also obtained a Tier 2 flame core. As long as he had the chance to return to the blazing flame monarch, Grimm would naturally have the means to turn the core into a loyal and reliable elemental puppet. After some consideration, Grimm had to admit that this fire elemental plane was the most suitable place for him to train and grow his muscles. If he had 100 years, he would definitely be able to raise a puppet army made up of rank 2 elemental puppets. At that time, it would not be a bad thing for him to switch professions and become a small Lord of the Flames. At the very least, the clumsy elemental creatures here were much easier to deal with than magi of the same rank. After pondering for a moment, Grimm did not leave the burning steps in a hurry. Instead, he found a relatively calm cave nearby and began to absorb the flame essence impatiently. The assassination of the Lord of the Flames was extremely strange. If he came into contact with the Lord of the Flames too early, he could easily trigger a death trap set up by the enemy. Hence, Grimm had long since made up his mind to treat this assassination mission as a rare holiday and training. Now that he had found some treasures here, he naturally had to stay here for a few days. Every flame essence like this was extremely precious to a fire wizard. After all, in the Magus world, treasures that could improve one's elemental affinity were all priceless. Now that he had a chance to get one for free, Grimm naturally would not let it go. Thus, in the following month, Grimm temporarily stayed in this cave that did not have any crack. Day after day, he quickly absorbed the flame essence. While he was busy, the Balrog did not stay idle either. Grimm released over 100 beginner-apprentice flame puppets in one go. They were scattered around the burning steppes for tens of kilometers, silently monitoring the surroundings. Once they discovered a valuable flame treasure or magic gem erupting from the ground, the Balrog would immediately move out and snatch it away. For a moment, the burning steppes were in a state of panic. The smarter flame creatures knew that a powerful being had appeared nearby, so they quickly ran away. In any case, the fire elemental plane was so huge, and there were so many dangerous places like this that they couldn't even count. There was no need for them to clash head-on with this terrifying powerhouse just for some resources and treasures. Those that were left behind were ignorant fools who did not even have their own consciousnesses. Hence, the Balrog worked hard, while Grimm, the big boss behind the scenes, enjoyed the fruits of his labor. He lived a carefree life in this area, eating until his stomach was full. If he ignored his physical needs, Grimm's progress in the fire elemental plane would definitely be faster than in the Magus world. A month later, within the silent cave, a human-shaped statue that was wrapped in thick ash suddenly trembled. Without any visible movement, the volcanic ash on Grimm's body melted like snow and flowed down his body. As the ash on his eyelids fell, Grimm slowly opened his eyes. Two blinding golden flames suddenly lit up in the deep, dark red cave, illuminating the entire space with a bright yellow light. AI chip, check my body stats. Beep. Receiving host's command. Self-examination will now begin. With the familiar sound of the AI chip's operation. A screen appeared in Grimm's mind, listing his basic stats in detail. Grimm, mid-grade 2. Profession: Elemental Magus, Fire Specialization. Stats: Strength 11 plus 1, 18, Vitality 13, 20, Agility 10, 8, Spirit 26 plus 1, 29. Note: Stats after transformation are shown in bracket. Profession skills: Body of Fire, Balrog transformation. In the Magus world, Grimm's basic strength was only that of a mid-grade 2 Fire Magus. Perhaps on a large-scale battlefield, his powerful fire element sorcery would be able to display frightening might. However, in a small-scale Magus battle, Fire Magi did not have enough mobility and could not break away from Magi of other elements. This was a fact that everyone knew about. However, once Grimm transformed into a Balrog, his basic strength would increase by a large margin. 29 points of spiritual force and 20 points of vitality would allow him to sweep away most Magi of the same rank, becoming a terrifying demon king that ruled over the battlefield. Unfortunately, even if he sealed a Balrog's heart in his body, he would not be able to maintain the Balrog transformation for too long. If he went all out, the Balrog transformation could only last for a short 15 minutes. In this 15 minutes, Grimm, who was going all out, could even stand toe-to-toe with an initial grade 3 divine warrior. However, it would take more than 15 minutes for Grimm to revert to his original state. He would only be a mid-tier Tier 2 sorcerer, and a Tier 3 sorcerer could easily torture him to death. However, if the battlefield was in the fire elemental plane, Grimm was confident that he could extend the duration of his Balrog transformation to 30 minutes. To him, this was no different from doubling his strength. His soul imprint had already been sealed by the origin contract, so it would be difficult for it to undergo any qualitative changes. Hence, when Grimm checked his stats, his attention was not on his basic stats but on his elemental affinity. Following Grimm's gaze, a bar graph slowly appeared in front of him. From top to bottom, different colored ribbons represented Grimm's body's affinity with various mysterious forces. The one at the top was, of course, the one with the highest affinity, and the rest decreased. The first was the fire element. Its length was almost the sum of all the other ribbons, and its color was naturally bright red. The second was the earth element. Its length was only 1/4 the length of the fire element, and its color was also a dull yellow. The third was the metal element. Its length was only 1/12 the length of the fire element, and its color was a dull rusty color. There were 5 or 6 more affinity ribbons, but their lengths were pitifully short. Grimm did not even have the interest to look at them. The longer the ribbons, the higher the affinity between the elemental particles and Grimm's body. This way, Grimm's daily meditation and training would allow him to achieve greater results with the same amount of effort. Over the past few days, Grimm had devoured and digested the flame essence, which had increased his affinity with the fire element by at least 1/7. Moreover, if one looked closely, one could even see a trace of strange gold on the fire element's red ribbons. This gold represented Grimm's own understanding of the law of fire. In the future, when Grimm's knowledge and understanding of the law of fire reached a certain level, he would be able to wield the power of laws. Chapter 761. According to the hierarchy of Magi, Magi could be divided into 9 ranks. However, if they were to use the power they could control, all low-ranked Magi would be able to control elemental force. Only after reaching Tier 4 and reaching the pinnacle of a certain law of power could Shurfeng produce law of power. From then on, rank 4 Magi could change their title from Elemental Magi to Magi of Laws. The difference in power between elemental force and laws could not be compared at all. At least in the plane, the power of the natural order was a powerful force that could compete with divine power. If a magus had mastered elemental force, he could use his spiritual force to gather the surrounding magic elements to increase the power and effect of the spell. The relationship between a magus and elemental particles was like that between a pursuer and the pursued. It was all about being affectionate and living in harmony. However, once one mastered the power of laws, the relationship between a magus and elemental particles would become that of a master and a servant. When the command flag was waved, the elemental particles would move without the slightest bit of resistance. Above the power of laws, there was also the terrifying power of a domain. When a magus had mastered the power of laws to the extreme, he could use this power to weave a space that was completely under his control. The strength of such a space was closely related to the magus' proficiency in controlling the laws of power, the depth of their comprehension of the laws of power, and the number of laws of power that they had comprehended. Such a magus was usually referred to as a grand magus. One of the main reasons why it was difficult for grand magi to enter a plane was that their own space was incompatible with the laws of the plane. In a situation where there was no way to reconcile, the Grand Wizard was rejected by almost all the planes of the world, and could only create a small plane of his own to be his shelter. Of course, above the power of domains, there seemed to be an even more powerful and mysterious power. Grimm had only heard of this power from a few magi, but he had never seen it for himself. Grimm had no idea what the attribute of this power was, or how it worked. Even though he had searched through all the books and ancient books on witchcraft, he could not find anything related to this power. It was rumored that only great magi who had reached rank 9 could wield such power, and there were only 3 of them in the magus faction. As a bright yellow flame rolled across the surface of his body, all the remaining ashes disappeared without a trace in the crackling flames. Grimm was still in his fiery form as he crawled out of the cave. Outside the cave, the 5-meter-tall lava body of the terrifying Balrog was still as eye-catching as ever. Beside it, on the scorched land, there was a small pile of gems. As soon as Grimm's gaze swept over, he was attracted by the colorful and radiant mana aura. Although 99%, 999,999% of the materials in the fire elemental plane were composed of various forms of fire elements, it didn't mean that one couldn't find other elemental particles in the plane. However, in this single elemental plane where the fire element dominated, any foreign materials would be incinerated. The decomposed elemental particles would either be expelled out of the plane or be compressed and precipitated by the harsh environment, becoming high-quality elemental crystals or magic gems. These treasures were tempered by the fire elemental plane to the point that there were no impurities in the slightest. The elemental particles inside were much denser than the magic gems in the plane. Therefore, the elemental crystals and magic gems that could be found in the elemental plane were all of the highest quality in the world. Of course, their value in the magus world was proportional to their rarity, and they were essential materials for high-grade magi to set up powerful spell formations. Grimm went forward and searched, but he did not find a second flame essence. Instead, he found many elemental crystals, most of which were earth elemental. Grimm estimated that if he brought this small pile of treasures back to the magus world, it would be worth more than 200,000 magic crystals. This meant that he had only stayed in the fire elemental plane for a month, and he had already successfully earned a small magus tower. Thinking back to when he had just become a grade 1 magus, 10 to 20,000 magic crystals was enough for him to disregard his life and join the invasion of planes. But now, after becoming a grade 2 magus and earning more than 10 times the amount of magic crystals he had in the past, he was very calm, as if all of this was just an illusion. After quickly putting these treasures into his bag, Grimm recalled the elementary flame puppets that he had spread out. Out of the 100 he had spread out, less than 40 had been successfully retrieved. The rest had already been destroyed in the burning steppe. Once again, Grimm had the urge to build a spell laboratory in this fire elemental plane. Perhaps only then would he be able to get rid of the lack of resources in this plane, and turn the materials he had collected into real power that he could control. At that time, with the inexhaustible magic materials in the fire elemental plane, as well as the systematic knowledge and technology of the Magus world, Grimm could definitely turn this place into his own magic puppet factory. This would allow his puppet army to grow faster and more steadily. However, while the idea was beautiful, there were still many problems that needed to be solved in order to realize it. Right now, Grimm was facing his extreme lack of understanding of the fire elemental plane. But just as the father and daughter were speechless, the teleportation room suddenly glowed with white light, and a vast wave of space ripples gradually began to fill every corner of the room. The mysterious wizard formation hidden under the floor slowly emerged under the infusion of powerful magical energy, illuminating the entire space in a vast expanse of white. Someone was about to be teleported over. The father and daughter were startled, then overjoyed. They hurried to the entrance of the teleportation room and quietly waited for the teleportation to end. As the powerful space ripples collided and annihilated each other in the teleportation room, a strong white light flashed in the center of the teleportation formation, and they could vaguely see a few tall figures slowly emerge. When the white light gradually dissipated, Mary strode out of the room in her red crystal high heels, her footsteps loud and clear. Following behind her were two blood knights in bright armor and eye-catching cape. There were also two graceful, delicate, and charming blood elves. Behind the blood elves were the tall and mighty dragonman Zacha and the goblin machinist Tygol, who was dressed in tight-fitting leather armor. 7 Level 2 Wizards. 7 Level 2 Wizards had actually chosen to come as reinforcements this time. Gargamel's heart relaxed for the first time when he saw who had come. I need to know everything about this place immediately. You'd better give me a detailed report right now, Mary instructed in a low voice as she strode toward the wizard hall. Yes. I'll report right away. Gargamel immediately jogged after her. Chapter 762. Baron Wilms was dead. Of the 2 wizards that had accompanied the Baron, one was dead, and the other was heavily injured. The heavily injured wizard that had luckily escaped insisted that he had been attacked by a wizard from the Crimson family when he returned to the Scattered Tower Forest Association. This was like poking a hornet's nest. The elders of the Scattered Tower Forest Association had yet to express their stance, but the elders and deacons under them were already clamoring, demanding that the culprit who had publicly killed a wizard from the association be punished. A few small Magus families near the Crimson Throne jumped up and down, aiming their attacks at the Crimson family, which had risen to power in recent years. The Crimson family was after all a wizard family that had recently risen to power. They did not have enough allies in the Scattered Tower Forest, and instead had plenty of enemies. Thus, it was not surprising that an anti-Crimson family alliance was quickly forming. The main force of the anti-Crimson family alliance was naturally the few small wizard families near the Crimson Throne Wizard Pagoda. Their bases were too close to the Crimson family. If the Crimson family chose to expand outwards, it was likely that all of their family forces would be greatly or slightly affected. Rather than wait for the Crimson family to grow stronger and swallow them up, they might as well take advantage of the time when the Crimson family was internally divided to split them up. Of course, before taking action, these small wizard families had also put in a lot of effort to gain a deeper understanding of the wizard power within the Crimson Throne Wizard Pagoda. The Crimson family strategically split their forces in the north, transferring most of the family's power to the Icy Wind territory that was under the control of the Northern Witches. The other wizard families clearly did not think highly of this overstepping and subversive way of thinking. Even though they could still communicate and exchange resources through long-distance teleportation formations after splitting their forces in 2 places, there was a huge limit to the amount of magic crystals needed for a single teleportation. If the Crimson family was given a few decades to slowly manage and cultivate, they might really be able to blossom in two places, using the Crimson Throne and the White Tower to spread the family's power and influence to a wider area. Unfortunately, at the start of the split, both the Crimson Throne in the scattered Tower Forest and the White Tower in the northern Icy Wind territory were in a short period of weakness. Their clenched fists suddenly opened, and the power of the two wizard pagoda naturally became weaker. The White Tower was out of their reach, but the Crimson Throne was within their reach. Thus, with enemies both in the open and in the dark adding fuel to the fire, a terrifying storm against the Crimson family was quickly brewing. As the butler of the Crimson Throne, Gargamel had naturally received countless reports and information. Unfortunately, the sorcerer's power he could mobilize was too little, so he was unable to change the increasingly harsh living environment in front of him. Over the past few days, the road to the south of the Wizard's Pagoda had been cut off, and the markets and small towns around the Wizard's Pagoda had become sparsely populated. Most of the adventurers, mercenaries, and acolytes had already left the area, quietly waiting for the family war to erupt. In the past, such a large-scale battle between magi families would not have been permitted by the Scattered Tower Forest Association. After all, the ones who were damaged in the war were the core forces of the scattered Talon region. If the sorcerer families were allowed to kill each other, then the Scattered Tower Forest Association would eventually lose its foundation to resist the invasion of the three great sorcerer factions. However, it was still necessary to eliminate the weak and keep the strong. After all, a powerful sorcerer family could only reach the pinnacle by stepping on the bones of their enemies. Thus, when the Magi of the Association were ambushed and killed near the Crimson Throne Wizard's Pagoda, the Scattered Tower Forest Association loosened their control over the area and began to contact a few small factions in the area, forming a mighty anti-Crimson family alliance. Now, this alliance had already gathered enough sorcerers and was slowly encroaching on the outer perimeter of the Crimson Throne Wizard's Pagoda. If they were allowed to establish a foothold there, the Crimson Throne Wizard's Pagoda would have to face the enemy's prepared and planned attacks. Even though the Wizard's Pagoda was said to be indestructible, it still depended on who had it. If it was in the hands of a level 3 sorcerer, even a level 4 sorcerer might not be able to destroy the tower and kill him. But if the Wizard's Pagoda was in the hands of a level 2 sorcerer, the upper limit of the Wizard's Pagoda's power would be even more tragic. As long as one's strategy was appropriate, their methods were forceful, and there were enough sorcerers, it would not be that difficult to forcefully destroy a small wizard's pagoda. Thus, the area around the Crimson Throne was in a state of panic. Even the sorcerers and apprentices of the family did not dare to take a step out of the wizard's pagoda. First of all, let me make one thing clear. Since Grimm was not present, Mary sat on the main seat. This is a huge conspiracy against us. At this point, Mary paused for a moment. Her scarlet eyes that were as clear as rubies slowly swept across the audience. The sorcerers in the area each took a corner, silently listening to Mary's declaration before the battle. Standing beside Mary was naturally her direct descendant of the Blood Clan. Soros and Winsoul, the two fake level 2 Blood Knights, as well as two beautiful Blood Elves with delicate features and long pointy ears. As the old fox Winsoul had to stay in the White Tower to assist Merrill, he did not appear in this battle. As for the other two level 2 sorcerers of the family, Draconian Zachary and Gnome Tygol, they each took a corner, silently listening to Mary's speech. To be honest, they could not be considered core sorcerers of the Crimson family. Draconian Zachary was the first level 2 soul servant Grimm had taken in. Naturally, everything would go according to Grimm's wishes. Now that Grimm was far away in the fire elemental plane, even though Draconian Zachary had participated in this family meeting with an indifferent attitude, it did not mean that he had to offer his loyalty to this weak Mary. Gnome Tygol only had level 1 strength. He relied on the unique mechanic profession of the gnomes to control the level 2 magical gnome Ripper with ease. Now that the gnome plane had become the property of the Crimson family, this gnome warrior could only pinch his nose and join the sorcerer's team for the benefit of his race. However, within the Crimson family, Gnome Tygol only bowed to the powerful wizard Grim. As for this wizard Mary, she had not reached the point where she could directly order him around. In order to show that the Destiny Witches valued this matter, Alice had also sent her powerful subordinate, the berserk witch Sophia, over. The burly Sophia, who looked like a super-muscular man, hugged her thick wizardwood staff and sat alone in a corner, looking like she was obedient but not obedient. Other than these unruly fellows, on the other side of the hall were the sorcerers of the wizard pagoda of the Crimson Throne. The Crimson Chief Gargamel, the forest demon wizard Ava, their beloved daughter wizard Amelia, the chimera leader Karen. Originally, the wizard pagoda had recruited a few independent sorcerers, but considering that they were not reliable, Gargamel did not summon them to participate in this family meeting. Glancing around, Mary could not help but furrow her brows when she saw that the people bowing before her were actually a group of disorganized sorcerers. Grim is currently exploring the fire elemental plane and will not be able to return to the family for the time being. Before coming here, I have already met with Alice. The crisis that the Crimson Throne is facing this time is most likely a plot by an enemy behind the scenes against Grim. Lady Mary, could you please explain the specific situation in detail? Draconian Zacha was indeed the most loyal soul slave. Once he heard that the mission this time might involve the safety of his master, his anger was instantly ignited. The current situation is very complicated. I can only describe it in simple terms. Mary licked her red lips and said sternly, Grim went to the fire elemental plane with the help of the power of the Crimson Throne Wizard Pagoda and left the coordinates of the plane here. Once this place is attacked and the coordinates are lost, Grim will have to go through a lot of trouble to return. Are you saying that those bastards are targeting this place to make our master get lost in another plane? Draconian Zacha's voice immediately rose by an octave. Dazzling lightning crackled on the body of the Draconian, who was covered in azure scales. That's right. Mary nodded and said, So, before Grim returns, we must guard the Wizard Pagoda closely and not let them destroy the coordinates of this place. Understood, Lady Mary. Draconian Zacha immediately became murderous. Before our master successfully returns, Zacha is willing to listen to Lady Mary's orders and beat those bastards back to their nests. Mary nodded in satisfaction, her gaze quickly focusing on the gnome Tygol. Faced with the mental pressure of a level 2 vampire wizard, even someone as experienced as Tygol could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. He cursed the big fellow's straightforwardness and recklessness in his heart. Then, he sighed with sorrow. He could only force a smile and step forward. Lady Mary, while Lord Grim is not here, I am also willing to listen to your orders. Since the 2 level 2 reinforcements of the family had agreed, it was easy to assign the following task. As for the level 1 magi within the family, they could only bow their heads and listen to orders in such a situation. They had no right to bargain. Gargamel, you can now report the situation of the enemy. Yes, Lady Mary. Gargamel obeyed and stepped out from the side. He cleared his throat and looked around at the core magi of the family, then began to introduce them in a loud voice. Currently, there are 5 factions preparing to attack the Crimson family. The Kamara family, the Undul family, the Senna's family, the Demonic Forest Hut, the Leighton Wizard Academy. They have gathered most of their forces and stationed them in the Kamara family's territory, preparing to use it as a springboard to quickly invade the Crimson family. Chapter 763. Magi were a bunch of snobbish fellows. If there weren't enough benefits or potential benefits, it was simply too difficult for them to risk their lives. However, once they caught a whiff of blood, they would immediately transform into the world's most terrifying hunters, using their terrifying spells to tear enough flesh from their enemies to fill their stomach. The Kamara family, Undul family, Senna's family, Demonic Forest Hut, Leighton Wizard Academy, 5 unfamiliar names, and all of them belong to small forces scattered throughout the Pagoda Forest region. With their strength, it would be difficult for them to gather 100 magi. Hence, Gargamel was 90% certain that there were other factions that had indirectly participated in the attack on the Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard Pagoda. Even though the Crimson family had only been around for a short period of time, the outside world had learned of their strength and bravery through a few tough battles. Last time, even a rank 3 vampire magus had led an army and suffered heavy casualties in front of the Blazing Flame Monarch's Wizard Pagoda. From then on, the vampire family was unable to recover from that setback, and could only retreat to the family's ancient castle, barely managing to hold on. According to the investigations of Gargamel's subordinates, there were indeed some strange fellows that looked like vampires among the enemy's magi. If the information was true, it meant that the rank 3 vampire Magus Hennis would definitely be among the Blazing Flame Monarch's enemies. At present, the so-called Anti-Crimson Family Alliance was still gathering at the Kamara family's base. That place was 200 miles away from the Blazing Flame Monarch, and was the closest gathering point the enemies could find. Between the Kamara family's base and the Blazing Flame Monarch was a rugged and bumpy path in the forest. If it was just a small merchant group, they could barely pass through. However, if it was a majestic army of 30,000 people, it would be difficult for most of their supplies to pass through this small path. Furthermore, the Crimson family did not have any land for them to occupy. If the enemy wanted to wipe out the Crimson family's existence, the only way was to gather enough cannon fodder to attack the Wizard's Pagoda underground. This was undoubtedly a huge risk. Hence, the main force of the enemy's attack could only be the 100 or so magi that had been pieced together. As for the 30,000-strong army that the nobles had brought, rather than saying that they were here to fight, it would be more accurate to say that they were here to serve as cannon fodder. Ever since Mary arrived at the Flame Monarch, the Crimson family had moved all of their subordinates and lower-level factions into the Wizard's Pagoda. All the members of the family hid underground and never showed their faces again. However, the Wizard's Pagoda still managed to send out a large number of gnome construction machines to destroy the forest path leading to the Wizard's Pagoda from Pine Tower Town before the enemy could attack them. If the enemy's main force wanted to get close to the Flame Caves, they would have to clear this path first. The enemy seemed to have discovered the intentions of the Crimson family. In order to completely block them back underground, they actually ditched the large but useless private army of nobles and gathered 103 magi to rush outside the Flame Cave overnight, setting up a temporary camp. When the magi of the Crimson family were trapped underground and unable to get out, the enemy's army began to march towards the Crimson family with great difficulty. Night fell and the sky was dotted with stars. The outside of the Flame Cave, which had been quiet for more than 10 days, was once again bustling with activity. Exquisite and beautiful tents sprouted out like mushrooms after the rain, almost covering the entire area. Over 100 magi from different factions were gathered here, discussing the details of the attack on the Crimson family. The magi guards they had brought were scattered around the camp, on high alert to prevent the Crimson family from sending people to launch a sneak attack. In the center of the camp was a large and beautiful tent. It was filled with 20 to 30 magi representing various factions, silently listening to the 2 magi in charge of the mission distribution. There were only 2 magi in charge, both at level 3. One was naturally the level 3 vampire Hennisvik, who had volunteered to help. One of them was Vic, and the other was the only tier 3 sorcerer of the Kamara family, Yurga the Crow of Death. Beside the 2 level 3 magi, there were 11 level 2 magi in various forms and attires. The rest were all peak level 1 combat magi. The Kamara family was a small magus family closest to the Crimson family. According to a private agreement, after taking down the Flame Monarch's Wizard's Pagoda, this place would become the Kamara family's territory. At that time, all the factions participating in the battle would jointly invest in building a medium-sized human city here, and then share the resources of the dark forest around it. Because they were tempted by the huge benefits, the Kamara family could be said to have given their all in this crusade against the Crimson family. They had brought almost all of the Magi and nobles' private armies. Since they had already arrived and successfully trapped the Magi of the Crimson family underground, the next step in the battle was a problem that everyone needed to consider. Even though the Magi had rushed over with light carriages, a large number of siege weapons and servant armies had been left behind over 100 miles away. They were currently trudging through the muddy forest path with difficulty. According to their current speed, it would take at least 7 days for the servant army to arrive. The Magi could not wait any longer. To them, every day was precious. Now that they had wasted 7 days waiting for the servant army, they could not take it anymore. Thus, on the night they arrived at the fire cave, the 2 level 3 Magi gathered the rest of the Magi and discussed how to first attack the wizard's pagoda that was suppressing the Flame Monarch's wizard's pagoda. From the fire cave to the lava hall underground, there was still at least half a mile of underground tunnels to traverse. One could imagine that the Magi of the Crimson family had set up layers of mechanisms and densely packed wizard traps. Thus, their top priority now was to first clear a path to the lava hall. This task was given to the group of 14 people from the Demonic Forest Hut. The Demonic Forest Hut was a small Magus faction located in the center of the scattered tower forest, known for their expertise in creating low-level wizard items. The leader of the faction was a level 2 alchemist Magus, and the 13 members under him were all experts in the alchemy industry. The leader of the Demonic Forest Hut, the level 2 alchemist Magus Roy, was naturally dissatisfied with this assignment. However, when the level 3 Magus Yurga promised that the Magi of the Demonic Forest Hut would not have to participate in the first 3 rounds of the mission to attack the wizard's pagoda after clearing out the traps in the fire cave, he reluctantly nodded his head in agreement. Thus, while the Magi were resting in the camp on the surface and preparing for the next battle, the 14 Magi of the Demonic Forest Hut entered the fire cave in a single file. Fire cave. Due to the existence of the underground sea of lava, the temperature within the cave was 10 degrees higher than the outside world. The level 2 Magus Roy smelled the thick, pungent smell of sulfur the moment he stepped into the tunnel. He could not help but frown. It was rumored that the Crimson family had many level 2 Magi. Even though Roy was a tier 2 sorcerer, he could not help but feel his scalp go numb and his heart tremble when the task of taking the lead fell on him. Their army had come here with the intention of eliminating the Crimson family once and for all. Under such circumstances, it would be strange if the Magi did not retaliate with all their might. Thus, Roy stopped in his tracks the moment he stepped into the cave and gestured to his subordinates behind him. As alchemy Magi, they naturally had their own unique battle style. 2 of the 13 level 1 alchemy Magi stepped forward and took out a small potion bottle from their waist. They opened the cork and gently tossed the bottle in front of them. In the next second, 2-meter-tall, heavy earth elementals crawled out of the ground, silently standing respectfully in front of the Magi. "Scout ahead." The 2 Magi immediately gave the order. 2 earth elementals that looked like humans, whose bodies were completely made of dark soil, and whose faces were so rough that only blurry facial features could be seen, strode forward with heavy footsteps, shoulder to shoulder, toward the other end of the tunnel. They had only moved 10 meters when a wizard trap in the corner of the cave was triggered. An explosive fireball instantly exploded between the 2 earth elementals. The surging flames and berserk shockwaves caused the 2 earth elementals to fall to the ground. The surface of their bodies rapidly scorched and cracked, before shattering like porcelain. 2 high-ranked acolyte earth elementals were killed just like that by an explosive fireball trap. The Magi of the Demonic Forest Hut did not care about such a loss. After using a spell to block the shock waves from the explosion, the two magi took out 2 blue potions from their waist pouches and threw them in front of them. As the vial continued to roll forward, a thick blue liquid flowed out of it and gathered into a ball on the hard and hot floor. With a simple summon from the magi, 2 ice elementals emitting a bone-chilling cold crawled out of the potion. They only had the strength of a high-ranked acolyte, but they had long-range ice attack spells. The 2 ice elementals obviously did not like the environment here. Once they were summoned, they looked around in annoyance. Their facial features could not be seen, only 2 balls of icy blue light. Go! These low-ranked summoned elementals did not have complete intelligence and consciousness, so they could not comprehend overly complicated commands. Hence, the Magi's orders were usually very simple and crude. The 2 ice elementals immediately roared and charged into the depths of the cave. Who knew that as soon as they stepped over the earth elemental residue and took 2 steps forward, another bursting fireball exploded between the 2 of them. After a while, when the violent flame shock waves gradually dissipated, only 2 black scorch marks could be seen. There were no traces of the ice elementals left. The 2 magi alchemists shrugged their shoulders regretfully and threw out 2 new potion bottles. Chapter 764. Earth Elemental, Ice Elemental, Stone Elemental, Lightning Elemental, Fire Elemental. As long as they were cheap elemental lifeforms, the alchemy wizards did not mind summoning them from a faraway world to be used as cannon fodder. A low-grade elemental lifeform summoning potion only cost 3 magic crystals. If they could be used to exchange for an explosive fireball trap worth 12 magic crystals, it would be worth it no matter how one looked at it. Hence, the 13 rank 1 alchemy wizards took turns to summon all kinds of elemental lifeforms, commanding them to rush into the lava tunnels that led to the lower levels. The undulating sounds of explosions and the scorching heat waves that assaulted one's face stirred up the entire underground world. Even the gravel and dust on the rock walls began to rustle and fall continuously. The tunnel was filled with a choking smell of dust and smoke. Enemy discovered. Every summoned elemental lifeform had a weak soul connection with the alchemy wizard. After they were killed, the alchemy wizard could roughly understand the enemy's information through their soul connection. When the elemental slaves of the alchemy wizards plunged into the lava passageways, one of the alchemy wizards suddenly screamed in fear. What killed my elemental slaves was not a trap. It was a strange metal puppet that I've never seen before. Obviously, the information he obtained through his soul connection was very vague, so it was difficult for him to describe it. Where is it? The leader of the organization, Magus Roy, could not help but ask in a low voice. Ahead on the right, the second lava tunnel. As soon as this Magus reported the enemy's location, 2 new elemental lifeforms rushed into the lava tunnel he had pointed out. These were 2 strange wind elemental lifeforms. They did not have humanoid bodies, and their appearance was that of a small tornado that was constantly spinning. Only in the center of the tornado were 2 balls of red light that served as eyes. These fellows floated in the air as if they were weightless, so they were not suitable to be used as cannon fodder for the mines. However, their flying speed was extremely fast, so they were rather suitable as flying sentries. Just as the 2 wind elemental lifeforms turned a corner, they collided with the strange metal puppet that the Magus had described. Both sides looked at each other across the narrow tunnel and attacked at the same time. A series of wind blades cut through the air, slashing at the 3-meter-tall humanoid puppet wrapped in a dazzling metal shell. Sparks flew everywhere, and scratches could be seen everywhere. That terrifying guy didn't care about the wind elemental's attacks at all. He raised his 2 thick metal arms, and the metal tubes that extended from the front of his arms shot out high-speed metal projectiles that were hard to be seen by the naked eye. The 2 wind elementals couldn't help but tremble from the impact. Before they could hold on for more than 3 fingers, the two beginner wind elementals had their consciousness cores shattered and completely disappeared. Many of the alchemy sorcerers frowned as they looked at the close-up of the metal puppet on the projected screen. They evaluated the basic level of the metal puppet. Magus rank. Of course, comparing this clumsy and sluggish metal puppet to an official magus was overestimating it. However, considering that it had an indestructible metal shell and a goblin gun that had a shocking rate of fire, ordinary sorcerer apprentices would be the bane of their existence if they encountered them. They wouldn't even have the chance to resist before they were brutally slaughtered. Even quasi-sorcerers would have to be careful when dealing with these metal puppets. Otherwise, their weak defensive spells would not be able to withstand the crazy barrage of metal projectiles. Looks like we'll have to bring out some real weapons. An alchemy sorcerer grinned as he took out a large bottle of magic potion from his pocket and smashed it in front of him. As an extra-large jelly ooze monster crawled out of the ground with its swollen body, the whole tunnel was filled with a rotten and pungent stench. Damn it, Sing. Can't you summon a normal wizard beast? Get it away from us. Many alchemy sorcerers covered their noses, and a few female sorcerers glared at the guy who summoned the jelly ooze monster. It can't be helped. In such a narrow tunnel, other summoned creatures won't be able to take advantage of a pile of metal lump. To deal with a metal puppet, you either have to fight it head-on or use strong acid. Wizard Sing shrugged his shoulders and quickly commanded the jelly ooze monster to crawl to the other side of the tunnel. After a quarter of an hour, the jelly ooze monster and the metal puppet had successfully encountered each other. Almost without any orders, the two fellows from different camps began to attack each other crazily. Of course, the metal puppet was still using those fast metal projectiles. In such a narrow place, as long as it guarded one end of the lava tunnel, it would be impossible for the enemy to rush over from the other end. It would be impossible to do so without paying a heavy price. Metal projectiles with high kinetic energy traveled for 15 meters and crazily hit the jelly ooze monster's swollen and sticky body. Sludge splattered everywhere and stinky water flowed out. The jelly ooze monster's soft body had many small holes that looked like sieves. Black, stinky, sour, and stinky water flowed out from the holes. However, it did not seem to feel anything. It continued to extend its tentacles of different shapes from its soft jelly body and slowly approached the Archer magic machine. As it approached, it opened up some small mouths and continuously spat out the same stinky corrosive liquid at the joints of the Archer magic machine. As soon as the black sticky liquid landed on the metal body of the Archer magic machine, it immediately let out a sizzling sound of corrosion. At the same time, thick white smoke rose. The Archer magic machine's intelligence unit had already been set up by the goblin engineers to guard this place and not let any enemy pass. Therefore, even if the enemy was slowly approaching, it did not even take half a step back. The metal barrels in his arms had already turned red due to the high-speed firing, but the rhythmic da-da-da sound of the metal bullets never stopped for a moment. When the jelly ooze monster crawled through the middle of the lava channel, the wide shoulders of the Archer magic machine opened up, revealing a dense array of goblin fire arrows. In the next second, under the push of bright yellow flames, 8 goblin fire arrows flew out and pierced the jelly ooze monster's body. Bang bang bang, a series of energy explosions occurred in the bloated and ugly body of the jelly ooze monster. It was like a skin bag that was filled with too much liquid. The bloated body of the jelly ooze monster expanded even more, and the surface of its body emitted terrifying squeaking noises. It seemed like its expansion had reached a certain limit. The alchemist Sing, who had been calmly watching the battle from the back, suddenly had a change of expression. In the next second, another 2 goblin fire arrows pierced the jelly ooze monster's body and caused another explosion. This time, the jelly ooze monster that relied on its inflated body to digest the energy waves had no more energy left to expand. It actually exploded under the watchful eyes of the alchemist. In an instant, the lava channel that was less than 15 meters long was completely smeared with a layer of sticky and smelly black rotting liquid. There were also countless beast bones and fur scraps in it. Under the rapid corrosion of the strong acid, the entire lava channel instantly softened like the stomach wall of a terrifying monster. A horrible stench that could choke people to death filled every inch of space. The Archer magic machine that was ordered to guard the end of the channel was also drenched by the strong acid. Under the thick white smoke, the spikes and edges of the Archer magic machine's tall metal body were corroded into a pile of mud. Two crisp sounds were heard. The Archer magic machine's two metal arms were corroded and fell to the ground. A moment later, the entire Archer magic machine softened, and sparks flew everywhere. It was finally completely destroyed. The wizard-ranked Jelly Ooze monster versus the wizard-ranked Archer magic machine ended in a lose-lose situation. Of course, this had something to do with the terrain here. If the Archer magic machine could move freely and use the kiting tactic to continuously attack the enemy, they might be able to take down the Jelly Ooze monster with only minor damage. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in war. Seeing that the metal puppet opposite him was also destroyed, Alchemist Singh forced a smile on his face. However, the fact that a wizard-level summon was killed still made him feel like he was bleeding in the depths of his heart. After all, a wizard-ranked wizard beast like this was usually worth more than 100 magic crystals on the market. Even though he was rich, he could not help but feel a little heartache after losing it here. However, just as his expression lightened up, a new Archer magic machine appeared in the darkness at the end of the lava channel. It made clanking noises as it appeared in front of the alchemist wizards. Whoosh! In the next second, a small hole opened up in the chest of the magic machine, and a thick stream of flames sprayed out from it, burning the entire passage. Although the strong acid was terrifyingly corrosive, it could not withstand the burning of such a fierce stream of flames. After a moment, when the magic machine cut off the flames, the entire lava channel became as hard as steel again. However, the surface of the lava channel that was made of flint and lava was now full of holes, resembling the surface of the moon under a super-magnifying telescope. That was not all. A strange device that looked like a bullet slot extended out from the back of the Archer magic machine, and it began to shoot metal plates the size of washbasins at various parts of the lava channel. As soon as these metal plates landed on the ground, they popped out metal spikes and fixed themselves in place. The smooth and flat metal surface shone with a layer of faint fluorescence. Goblin ***. Chapter 765. Advancing through the fiery cavern was unprecedentedly difficult. It was beyond the imagination of the alchemists. The Crimson family had set up a shocking number of metal puppets in the underground tunnel. Though they did not have elemental attacks, their indestructible metal bodies and goblin muskets that could destroy everything were enough to annihilate any intruder that dared to appear in front of them. Apart from the revolving goblin muskets, they were also equipped with goblin pistols, goblin rockets, and goblin flamethrowers. Armed with these goblin weapons, they were able to hold their own against 10,000 enemies. The demonic forest hut alchemy sorcerer's dream of using cheap elemental summons to clear the underground tunnel was shattered. The Archer magic machines were not invincible, but the price the alchemy sorcerers had to pay in order to destroy them was exponentially higher. At the start, Sorcerer Singh had used a wizard-level ooze monster to destroy an Archer magic machine. The goblin mechanics behind the scenes immediately adjusted the equipment and attack patterns of the Archer magic machines, so that such a thing could not happen again. In the following battles, the alchemy sorcerers would have to pay 3 to 5 times the price if they wanted to take down any of the key nodes leading to the depths of the underground tunnel. Especially in some of the underground stone halls, there would be organized squads of magic machinery. There were not many of them, only 5 or 6 of them. However, when they gathered together, the scorching metal bullets would form a terrifying barrage. Any living thing that appeared in front of them would be torn apart in an instant. Powerful metal bullets could even bounce off multiple times after colliding in the magma tunnel, making it even more difficult to predict the trajectory of the bullet. At the back, the alchemy sorcerers had to summon their wizard-level elemental slaves and cast a magic shield that could resist physical attack. Otherwise, if they charged into the enemy's shooting range one by one, they would be shot down before they could even reach the enemy. They would only become laughable targets for the enemy to practice their shooting skills on. After attacking a few intersections, though they had successfully destroyed 17 of the Crimson family's archer magic machines, the demonic forest hut alchemy sorcerers had to pay a total of 42 wizard-level summoning potions. The distance they had advanced was less than 75 meters. At the thought of the 400 to 500 meters ahead, even the wealthy alchemy sorcerers began to pant heavily. Though the landlord had some surplus food, they could not waste it like this. However, even though the situation was ugly and their wizard-level wizard beasts were so weak, the alchemy sorcerers did not have the urge to charge into battle. In the sorcerer community, alchemy sorcerers, enchanters, and appraisers were often categorized as support sorcerers. Their own combat abilities were very weak, and they relied almost entirely on spells and potions to fight. Over time, they had formed a special combat group that was not willing to face their enemies head-on. If they were to fight normally, they would either rely on poisons or summoning potions, using a large number of cheap summoned creatures to overwhelm their enemies. Moreover, most alchemy wizards liked to stick together to avoid being beheaded by someone who was sneaking up on them. As long as the alchemy wizards were willing to take the risk and rely on their wizard-level defensive spells, they would definitely be able to rush to the front of the archer magic machine under the storm of metal bullet. By then, they would have more opportunities to eliminate the enemies and save a few bottles of wizard-level summoning potions. It was a pity that they would be putting themselves in danger if they did so. If anything happened, they would be in danger of dying if they charged in front of the enemies. With the alchemy sorcerer's nature, as long as there was a 1% chance of their lives being threatened, they would not charge into battle. While the cost of summoning elemental servants was huge, they did not have to risk their lives. Of the two evils, they had to choose the lesser of two evils. The alchemy sorcerers of the demonic forest hut continued to waste their resources. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the underground lava cave that they could not see, a group of vampires who had been lying in ambush for a long time were cursing in frustration. They had seen cowards, but they had never seen such cowards. What else could these useless sorcerers do other than summoning elemental servants? As he cursed, he led a few Grade 2 vampires to hide in the shadows of the cavern's ceiling. The enemy's advancement was too slow, and they were advancing too cautiously. This undoubtedly made the vampires' plan to take advantage of the chaos to launch a sneak attack fall through. The narrow and hard underground cavern made it difficult for the enemy to advance, and it was also difficult for the vampires to launch a sneak attack on them. Left with no choice, Soros could only secretly send a message to the Gargamel guarding the wizard's pagoda, asking him to take away a portion of the archer magic machinery and weaken the resistance in the first half of the cavern. Only then did he finally place the group of alchemy sorcerers in the underground hall where they had chosen to ambush. The enemies in front of them were retreating step by step. Even though they had paid a high price, victory was in sight, wasn't it? The enemies in the underground hall had been cleared, and the alchemy sorcerers of the demonic forest hut entered one after another, beginning to inspect every inch of the place. The 13 Tier 1 wizards were divided into several groups. Some of them specialized in summoning elemental servants that could fight, and they charged into the winding tunnels in front of them. Some of them summoned powerful earth elementals to repair the terrain in the stone hall, creating conditions for the large army to pass through later. Even though many elemental servants had died in battle, the number of wizard beasts and summoned beasts surrounding the sorcerers was still innumerable. The alchemy sorcerers' protection of their own safety had reached a ridiculous level. This was already the second underground stone hall they had occupied. Just like before, those that needed to be swept were swept, and those that needed to be cleaned were cleaned. There were also a few sorcerers responsible for the safety of the passageway. Waves of detection waves from different elemental systems swept back and forth in the stone hall, but they did not detect the presence of any living or abnormal creatures. Only then did the alchemy sorcerers let go of their worries and began to shift their attention to the attack and exploration of the underground lava channel. However, somewhere above the alchemy sorcerer's head, a fist-sized stone painted with strange patterns on the ceiling of a natural stone hall moved slightly, revealing a narrow space behind it. 4 vampires that had turned into vampire bats crawled out from within, hanging upside down in the darkness. They narrowed their crimson eyes, coldly looking at the alchemy sorcerers who were busy working below them. This small cavern had been carefully dug out by the gnomes. The rock that sealed the cavern had even been carved with mysterious runes that could evade detection and conceal one's aura. This had allowed them to avoid the alchemy sorcerer's mental scan and wizard detection spells. Now, they were only waiting for a signal from the wizard's pagoda to attack. When that time came, it would be time for them to go on a killing spree and slaughter the enemies that deserved to die. Within the lava hall, many archer magic machines were lined up in a neat formation, silently waiting for the battle order from the wizard's pagoda. Mary, dressed in a tight, blood-red leather armor, stood proudly on the spot, listening to the deafening explosions coming from the underground cavern. Amidst the noisy and indistinguishable roar, Mary's specially constructed auditory perception ability distinguished and filtered out a hidden ultrasonic signal. The enemies have fallen into ambush. Inform the defending troops to counterattack. After coldly ordering, Mary flapped her wings and transformed into a palm-sized blood-red bat. She quickly flapped her bat wings and silently rushed into the dark underground lava channel. Quick, quick, quick! Inform all the archer magic machines to counterattack immediately. The Chimera leader Karen immediately chased after Mary, passing down the order one by one. In the underground cavern, the blood-red bat that Mary had transformed into was like a bolt of blood-red lightning, gliding quickly in the dark underground cavern. When she encountered the magic machines that blocked her way, she did not even have the time to greet them. She simply passed through the gaps in their bodies and headed straight for a place far away. Her appearance was like a signal to attack. The eyes of the archer mechs that were scattered all over the lava channel, waiting for the enemy to attack, lit up. Deactivating their defensive mode, they transformed back into their humanoid mechs and began to follow Mary to the top of the passageway. In the blink of an eye, Mary arrived at an underground stone hall where an intense battle was taking place. 3 archer magic machines and 12 wizard-level elemental servants were clashing fiercely. At the corner of the battlefield, there were the remains of 2 magic machines and the corpses of several wizard beasts. Mary's sudden arrival had undoubtedly attracted the attention of both sides, but Mary did not seem to notice. She did not care about the battle happening below her. She slipped through the gap between the 2 huge bodies in the middle of the battlefield and entered the pitch-black passageway behind the wizard beast. It's a powerful level 2 wizard. It's the vampire wizard on the list. The few alchemy sorcerers who had been observing the battle using projection spell cried out in alarm. Damn it! That terrifying Tier 2 female vampire is heading straight for them. What are you afraid of? She's alone. There's so many of us. Why should we be afraid of a mere vampire? Roy reprimanded in dissatisfaction, and the crowd of alchemy sorcerers regained their composure. Let the wizard beasts and elemental servants below seal off her path of retreat. We'll surround and kill her here. Following Roy's command, the few alchemy sorcerers hurriedly gave battle orders to the wizard beasts and elemental servants at the bottom of the cavern. Only then did they hastily set up a temporary defensive line. When the colorful witchcraft potions exploded in the center of the hall, Mary's figure had already appeared in the vision of the far end of the hall. "Tremble in fear, rookies. I'll bring death to you." Mary screamed out a battle declaration as she flapped her wings and pounced on the enemy in front of her. Her gaze quickly locked onto the leader of the demonic forest hut, the rank 2 alchemy sorcerer, who wore the most luxurious robes and had the coldest aura, Roy. Chapter 766. Rank 2 Vampire versus Rank 2 Alchemy Sorcerer. Both of them were at Rank 2, and their souls were about the same. There was no problem of rank suppression or battle power suppression. Rank 2 vampires were mutants among the sorcerers, and they invested most of their strength into the attribute of agility. However, in order to prevent any flaws in their overall coordination, they still needed to spend a lot of effort on strength, vitality, and spiritual force. If Mary's strength was too weak, even if she was extremely fast, her attacks would still be weak. If her vitality was too weak, the faster Mary was, the easier it would be for her to injure herself. If she did not have enough spiritual force, it would be harder for Mary to control the details of her body. Therefore, although Mary's basic attributes were outstanding in terms of agility, the other attributes still needed to reach a certain standard in order for her to unleash the strongest attack power. Compared to Mary, the rank 2 alchemy sorcerer belonged to the other extreme. Alchemy sorcerers belonged to the category of elemental sorcerers, so their main focus was on spiritual force. Since they did not need to engage in close combat like physique refinement sorcerers, they rarely spent too much time on strength and vitality. As for agility, it was a shameful weakness. However, to alchemy sorcerers, all these weaknesses were not flaws. If their strength was too weak, they could drink the giant potion. If their vitality was too weak, they could drink the dragon potion. If their agility was too low, they could drink the speed potion. Even if their spiritual force was insufficient, they could drink the ancient knowledge potion. In short, any flaws could be solved with a single drink. It was because of this extreme thinking that alchemy sorcerers did not seriously train their bodies. After taking off their sorcerer's robes, their magic tools, and their external enhancement, their vitality was not much higher than that of an ordinary human. Moreover, they did not seem to be very enthusiastic about spiritual force, which was what alchemy sorcerers relied on for a living. As a rank 2 sorcerer, most elemental sorcerers would spend most of their lives on improving their spiritual force. Take Grimm for example. He had only advanced to rank 2 20 years ago, but he had already increased his spiritual force from 21 points to 26 points. Alchemy sorcerers, on the other hand, spent most of their time in their alchemy laboratories, collecting, organizing, and concocting alchemy potions. As a result, Roy, who had advanced to rank 279 years ago, only had 24 points of spiritual force. Among ordinary Tier 2 sorcerers, this number might be considered passable. However, against Bloody Mary, who had 26 points in agility, it was not enough. At least in a battle, Roy was at an absolute disadvantage. Alchemy sorcerers were not good at fighting. Almost the moment Mary entered the battlefield, the battle broke out violently. Sorcerers, 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 sorcerers. In two, sorcerers, 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 and sorcerers, sorcerers, sorcerers. Sorcerers, 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 sorcerers of sorcerers, sorcerers is 1, 1, 1 and 2, 1, 1, 1 and 1, 1, 1, sorcerers, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, the 1 and 1, 1 sorcerers and 2. Of the Sioux. 1, 2, 1 cloud, 1, 1, 2 sorcerers, 1, 1 in, the 1, 1. Cloud of 1, 1, 2, the 1, 1, 2, 1. God. The moment the Tier 2 cloud giant appeared, it let out a soundless roar and charged at Mary. After summoning the cloud giant to entangle Mary, Roy, who was protected by many alchemy wizards and wizard beasts, did not feel safe at all. The potions in his hands exploded one after another. Some potions exploded into a brilliant magic halo, giving Roy and all the living beings around him a witchcraft halo. Some potions summoned a group of strange wind spirits, which disappeared into the air with a strange laugh. Some potions condensed into a strange colored witchcraft armor, attaching to Wizard Roy's body. Some potions exploded and summoned a giant black mamba snake with a body length of 20 meters and a waist of 1 meter thick. It coiled around Wizard Roy, vigilantly watching the surroundings. Wizard Roy was the only one who had prepared for this battle, and there were 13 other rank 1 wizards by his side. Once these guys made a move, the sudden explosion of the witchcraft halo and wizard power, as well as the densely packed summoned beasts, was enough to blind a mortal's eyes. Just a moment ago, these alchemy wizards were still surrounded by empty space. In the next moment, it was so crowded that even a drop of water couldn't get through. When the alchemy sorcerers were ready for battle, the abandoned cloud giant let out a mournful roar and vanished into thin air. After all, a summoned creature was still a summoned creature. Even if it was also a rank 2 like Mary, there was still a huge difference in battle power. Therefore, it only tangled with Mary for about 30 or so times before Mary pierced through its consciousness imprint and dispersed. Mary had returned to her bloody witch form. She wore a tight red leather armor, huge blood-red bat wings, sharp claws, sharp fangs protruding from her lips, and a pair of fiery red eyes that were as red as torches. Mary flapped her bat wings and slowly approached the group of alchemy wizards. The domineering aura of a queen and the biting cold smell of blood immediately filled every corner of this underground stone hall. Hiding in the densely packed protection circle of the wizard beasts and under the layers of protection spells, many alchemy wizards couldn't help but turn pale. "Wizard Mary, don't even think about defending against our attack." Wizard Roy, who thought he was already safe, couldn't help but say hatefully, "You can't even imagine the number of wizards in our alliance. Surrender now, and we'll give you a chance to rely on us. Otherwise..." Wizard Roy's fiery gaze slowly swept across Mary's voluptuous body. He couldn't help but feel a surge of anger in his heart. "What, you're interested in me? Then come out and let me have a look." Mary chuckled. A sweet, gentle, and beautiful smile appeared on her face. Only those who were familiar with her personality could sense her anger from her cold and ruthless gaze. "We're defending against your attack? Why does it look like I'm the one attacking you?" "Stupid girl, don't be so stubborn. When we break through your wizard's pagoda, you'll naturally kneel and beg for mercy." Roy cursed angrily. He didn't notice that as he spoke, Mary's blood-red eyes became brighter and brighter, almost as bright as the stars. Do you really think that you're the only one with more people? In front of a true powerhouse, numbers are useless. Only strength is the foundation of our foothold. Come out, my servant." Mary's wings suddenly spread to the maximum, and she shouted with the tone and emphasis of the Blood Queen. As the high-pitched female voice reached its peak, a shocking energy aura suddenly exploded from the shadows of the stone hall's ceiling. 4 powerful members of the Blood tribe appeared at the same time, fiercely pouncing behind the alchemy wizards. For more level 2 wizards? Even though the energy aura within their bodies was a level or 2 weaker than that of a level 2 wizard, the overflowing soul aura was a solid level 2. In order to deal with the demonic forest hut, the other party had sent 5 level 2 wizards at once, and one of them was the famous Blood Queen. This was too much. Before the fight even started, Wizard Roy already had the thought of running away in his heart. However, almost 80% of the magi of the demonic forest hut were here. If he, the leader of the faction, ran away, the remaining magi would only be able to be slaughtered. This would be too much of a blow to the demonic forest hut. Hence, this thought only flashed through Roy's mind for a moment before he forcefully suppressed it. Hold on and wait for reinforcements from the other side. Having made up his mind, Roy no longer dared to hold back. He threw out 2 small potion bottles glowing with magical light, summoning 2 level 2 creatures, the Blood Giant and the Lightning Elemental, in one go. Only then did he calm down a little. Charge. Let's end this quickly. Mary let out a cold laugh, her body transforming into a bolt of blood-red lightning. She was the first to charge into the attack range of the alchemy wizard. The 2 Blood Knights and 2 Blood Elves also launched a ferocious charge, one at the front and one at the back. With a flick of his finger, a dazzling light suddenly erupted in the underground stone hall. Dozens of different-colored witchcraft radiances gathered together, forming a surging witchcraft wave that instantly engulfed the bodies of the Blood Clan members. No matter what, the alchemy wizards belonged to the category of elemental wizards. Although they usually dabbled in potions, they did not completely abandon their old profession of spells. 13 rank 1 sorcerers contributed 13 rank 1 spells. Leader Roy even released a rank 2 Starfire Poison Cloud, which directly engulfed the 5 attacking vampires in a pale yellow cloud of smoke. In the next second, the loud explosions of spells, the frenzied roars of the wizard beasts, the continuous chain of elemental explosions, the splattering of flesh and blood, and the sound of the elemental shield collapsing all mixed together, forming a terrifying, deafening sound wave. The battlefield in the stone hall was thrown into chaos. However, in the midst of this chaos, Mary and her 4 subordinates had successfully escaped from the attack range. Although their bodies and armors were all battered by the violent waves of spells, Mary and the 2 Blood Knights had each captured a rank 1 alchemy wizard. These captured alchemy wizards' limbs were limp, as if their joints had been dislocated. However, they were still conscious. Seeing the situation in front of them, they all cried for help in horror. Unfortunately, before the alchemy wizards in the distance could react, Mary and the 2 Blood Knights had already used their sharp fangs to pierce the necks of the alchemy wizards in their hands, sucking on their flesh. Visible to the naked eye, the wounds on their bodies quickly healed under the surging of blood energy, looking brand new. Chapter 767. As the fierce battle erupted in the flame cavern, the large tent at the center of the surface camp was also broadcasting what was happening underground. Seeing the pathetic performance of the demonic forest hut sorcerers, many sorcerers in the tent sneered. These alchemy sorcerers usually relied on their monopoly of magic potions to act high and mighty. They had practically bullied every sorcerer family present. Now that they were being beaten like dogs by the enemy, the first feeling that emerged in the hearts of the sorcerers was not humiliation, but satisfaction. These alchemy sorcerers should have been taught a harsh lesson long ago. They should have known that what sorcerers truly believed in was power, and they were just a bunch of slaves to knowledge. However, this time they were comrades on the same side, so they could not sit by and watch as these vampires trampled on them. On the screen, a slender figure exuding a dense blood aura was rampaging through the defensive perimeter of the alchemist sorcerers. It was the Tier 3 vampire sorcerer, Hennis, who sat at the head of the table. Vic's face revealed an unconcealable, cold, killing intent. Damn it, damn it, damn it! It was because of this woman that the Vic family suffered the greatest defeat and loss in centuries. This woman caused the Vic family to regress 300 years, thinking about his centuries of hard work going down the drain and the fact that his own blood flowed in the body of an outsider. Hennis could not suppress the restlessness in his blood. This damned woman must die. This damned woman must die. This damned woman must die. Trying his best to suppress his emotions, Hennis spoke in a strange and refined tone. Since I've already lured that woman out, let me end her once and for all. When he mentioned the word, that woman, Hennis took a deep breath to calm himself down. This time, the allied forces were led by the Kamara family's Grade 3 sorcerer, Yurga. Therefore, if Hennis wanted to participate in the battle, he had to inform Yurga first. A Grade 3 sorcerer would not be restricted in any way. Hennis' actions were immediately approved. With a flash of light, this Grade 3 vampire disappeared without a trace. Underground Stone Hall. The bitter battle between the two sides continued. As an official Tier 2 wizard, Mary focused all her attention on the Tier 2 alchemy wizard. In the short span of 3 minutes, both sides had exchanged blows 174 times, and the damage caused was considerable. Of the 2 Tier 2 elemental servants Roy had summoned, only one remained. The lightning elemental fell under Mary's ferocious attack, and the right half of Mary's body was charred. If it weren't for Mary's timely lifesteal to heal her injuries, today's battle would have ended prematurely. As a vampire sorcerer, Mary's fighting style was also unusually fierce and tough. Relying on her high agility and flexibility, she was able to weave through the defensive circle that the alchemists had painstakingly built. From time to time, she would break into the circle and use her sharp claws to scratch or capture an enemy. The Grade 1 sorcerers were like human targets in her eyes. Their movements were stiff and slow, and their spells could not lock on to Mary's ghost-like movements. Left with no choice, most of the alchemists could only change their powerful single-target spells to area of effect spells, hoping to use stacking damage to force the elusive female vampire to retreat. If Mary's attacks were like a ghost assassin's, then the 2 Blood Knights' attacks were more like human-shaped tank. They were originally knights, and the combat skills they mastered were mainly in the middle and close range. Therefore, as soon as the battle began, the 2 Blood Knights brandished their blood-red swords and charged at the enemy's defensive line while enduring the sorcerer's attacks. Crimson Cross, Blood Rage Charge, Rapid Strike, Crimson Storm. Numerous knight combat skills were displayed by them. Every violent attack could kill a group of wizard beasts and elemental servants who were standing too close together. Most of the enemy's counterattacks were weakened by the blood mist that covered their bodies, so it was difficult for them to cause too much damage to the Blood Knights who were fully equipped with wind spirit armor. Even if their bodies were damaged by the concentrated attacks, they could replenish their lost life force by sucking blood. As for their bodies, they were in an endless cycle of damage and repair. As for the 2 Rank 2 Blood Elves, they did not have such a tough body, so they could only use their newly mastered Blood Bullet spell, Boiling Blood, Bloody Massacre, Vampiric Halo, and other blood elemental spells to launch long-range attack. These blood spells might not be powerful, but they were one of the best at disrupting the enemy's formation. Blood Bullet spell was just a spell that released blood-red energy balls to attack the enemy, which had some blood corrosion effect. Blood Boil, on the other hand, could make the target's blood boil and lose their ability to move. Blood Boil was more like a charm spell. It could make the target lose their rationality and fall into a frenzy of killing. Blood-Sucking Aura was an extremely sinister blood spell. The life force of the creatures that were shrouded by this aura would be absorbed by the Blood Elves and become their energy source to continue fighting. With the 2 Blood Elves jesting outside, they would occasionally use Blood Massacre to turn 1 or 2 alchemy sorcerers into bloodthirsty lunatic. They would then raise the staff in their hands and fight with the people around them. Fortunately, the sorcerers who were confused by Blood Massacre would temporarily forget their ability to cast spells. The effect could only last 3 to 5 seconds on Grade 1 sorcerers, or else the alchemy sorcerer's defensive circle would have long been blown to smithereens by their own sorcery spells. However, with the Blood Elves digging holes in the defensive circle, the 2 Blood Knights naturally had a way to continuously expand these holes, creating an unstoppable hole in the enemy's defensive circle. Faced with the continuous attacks of the 4 Level 2 blood breeds, the alchemy sorcerers could only drink bottle after bottle of spiritual protection potion in order to withstand the impact of the murderous intent in their hearts. At the same time, they had to continuously summon more elemental servants to block the Blood Knights' advance. Both sides were locked in a fierce battle in the middle of the stone hall. It was extremely bloody. In terms of combat strength, it was obvious that the sorcerers of the demonic forest cottage had the advantage in numbers. These alchemy sorcerers had wizard beasts and elemental servants for ranged combat, and they had also mastered one or two powerful offensive spells. Every time they focused their attacks on a Blood Knight, they would be badly mutilated and cry out in pain. They were not the least bit afraid of close combat, each of them carrying bundles of instant magic wands. Even if they were to be used one by one, they could drown their enemies in a frenzy of spells with their sheer numbers. If the Blood Knights did not have the miraculous recovery ability to absorb blood, they might have been worn down to death. In a short period of time, the sorcerers of the demonic forest cottage might have been able to force their enemies to retreat with their ferocious firepower. However, as the battle dragged on, the wizard beasts and elemental servants outside their defensive circle would be wiped out. The disadvantage of a Grade 1 sorcerer against a Grade 2 sorcerer quickly became apparent. They cast spells, summoned quickly, and constantly used instant magic wands. Although most of their attacks were completed with the help of spell potions and magic wands, they did not expend much of their own wizard power. However, as the battle dragged on, their spiritual force, which lacked training, could not keep up with their opponent's pace. To the 4 Grade 2 blood breeds, the sorcerers of the demonic forest cottage were like a flock of sheep working together to fend off a pack of wolves. At first, they relied on their complete formation and the courage to resist to the death to contend with the wolf. Once their defensive circle was torn apart, allowing 1 or 2 hungry wolves to enter, the entire flock of sheep would collapse in an instant, unable to resist the enemy like before. The moment the flock of sheep collapsed, Mary snuck to Wizard Roy's side like a ghostly assassin. "You want to kill me? You're not qualified," Wizard Roy shouted crazily, his fingers moving as he pulled the cork off the small potion bottle in his hand. As the yellowish-green smoke dispersed, he let out a roar and absorbed it into his body. The skin on the surface of his body immediately turned ashen. When Mary swept past his side, her sharp claws left 3 terrifying bone-deep wounds on his unprotected neck. If it was any other time, Roy would have retreated from the battlefield with his hand covering his neck. But now, he still roared and pulled out a magic wand from his waist, using an instantaneous, flaming sunlight ray to poke a bloody hole in Mary's lower abdomen. As for his throat that had been completely cut open, the broken wound appeared pale and tough. Unexpectedly, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Countless wriggling tentacles emerged from the exposed skin of the huge wound. They quickly twisted together, and in less than 3 seconds, the fatal wound was completely healed. Zombification, Mary groaned in pain. She quickly understood why her opponent did not die and was able to quickly counterattack. The smoke he absorbed just now must have given him the ability to temporarily turn into a zombie. This way, he would be able to avoid some fatal blows to his body. Taking advantage of Mary's ineffective close-range attacks, he could quickly lock onto Mary's position and launch some counterattack. After understanding the real reason, Mary let out a cold laugh. If she did not have the ability to absorb blood to recover, perhaps she would be afraid of her opponent's strange ability to trade blows. But now, Mary let out a clear whistle, spread her wide bat wings, and actually turned into a blood-red lightning, rushing towards Wizard Roy again. Both sides crossed each other. 2 more bloody holes appeared on Mary's body, and a terrible penetrating wound appeared on Wizard Roy's chest. "You can't kill me," Roy shouted crazily, his face full of madness. "When our reinforcements arrive, this will be your death." Amidst his frenzied roar, Mary turned around and launched her 3rd charge. Chapter 768. The exchange of blows was very short. With Mary's super-high agility, if she chose to ambush him from the outside, Roy's attacks would not be able to catch up to her. However, considering that the enemy's reinforcements could arrive at any time, Mary could only forcefully break through and establish an advantage on the battlefield by trading blows. Due to the similar attributes of the remaining blood giant beside Roy and Mary, their blood witchcraft had basically lost their effectiveness. They could only rely on their strong bodies to fight head-on. In order to quickly break through the blood giant's blockade, Mary had to pay a price. When she pierced through the blood giant's armpit, Mary's entire right arm was cut half a meter long. Some strange energy was attached to the wound, temporarily rendering her blood-sucking recovery ability useless. However, this way, Mary could face the rank 2 alchemy wizard Roy directly. In that split second, it was very difficult for the naked eye to capture Mary's frightening ghost-like figure. Only the powerful spiritual perception of a rank 2 wizard could clearly grasp Mary's current position. Without any hesitation, 2 small bottles of gurgling purple gas were smashed towards Wizard Roy's head. While Wizard Roy staggered back, he also crushed a bottle of potion in his hand, and a cloud of khaki mist spread in front of him. First, he felt his mind go into a trance. The things and scenes in front of him were a little chaotic. Then, he was covered by the mist. His body suddenly tightened, and his skin immediately lost feeling. This strange numbness began to quickly spread throughout his body. Damn it, it's a hallucinogenic potion and a petrifying potion. If it was any other elemental wizard, it would be impossible for them to instantaneously release so many attack spells that could penetrate a rank 2 wizard's defensive force field in a split second. However, alchemy wizards were such a bug. They actually used potions as a substitute for witchcraft to achieve such a shocking effect. Of course, because of this, they had specially evolved a set of professional skills to throw potions. Seeing that the enemy was hit, Wizard Roy, who was staggering back, immediately steadied himself in ecstasy. He pulled out a mysterious magic wand that was shining with a rainbow light from his belt. He used the purple-red magic crystal at the tip of the wand to aim at the hateful female vampire who was frozen in the mist. He quickly chanted the activation incantation of the magic wand. Collapse spell. This magic wand was imbued with a grade 2 single-target elemental spell, Collapse. All the elemental powers in the target's body would instantly go out of control and explode, completely annihilating the target's body and soul. There were not many wizards who could master such a terrifying spell, and even fewer who could enchant it on a magic wand. Wizard Roy had paid a huge price to obtain this magic wand. To be honest, if not for the heavy losses of the Demon Forest hut today, he would not have been willing to use such a protective trump card. Although the spells in the wand could be recharged, the powerful Tier 2 magic wand still had a long cooldown of 5 days. This also meant that in the next 5 days, this trump card would be temporarily useless. However, if he could kill a grade 2 vampire by destroying one of his trump cards, it would be worth it. After a short incantation, a gray ray shot out and directly turned the Mary into ashes, leaving not a single trace behind. Roy's eyes widened as he screamed in his heart. No matter how low Mary's magic resistance was, a grade 2 collapse spell shouldn't have been able to destroy her to the point where not even a strand of hair was left. Where's her magic equipment? Where's the vampire core in her body? The elemental symbiotic explosion shouldn't have destroyed her clothes, right? This was an illusion. Almost instantly, Wizard Roy understood what was going on. He shook his arm, and the magic wand disappeared. 8 potion bottles of different colors mysteriously appeared between his fingers. As long as he had a finger, no, half a finger, he could use these potions with different effects to arm himself again. Unfortunately, a streak of blood-red lightning silently passed by his side. In the next second, 2 arms, along with 8 small bottles of medicine, flew into the sky and landed far away. Roy screamed in pain, and a fountain of dark red blood gushed out from his 2 severed arms, instantly turning him into a bloody man. The blood giant, the surrounding wizard beasts, and the elemental slaves rushed forward and used their bodies to protect Wizard Roy. In front of them, Mary's beautiful figure slowly appeared. She was using her tender red lips to gently lick the blood that flowed out from her sharp, bloody hand. Good. Very good. This grade 2 alchemist wizard had already lost his ability to resist. It was the perfect time to capture him and use him as a blood meal. Ever since becoming a Grade 2 vampire, Mary had never tasted the fresh blood of a Grade 2 wizard. However, just as she took a step forward and was about to wipe out these guys, a sense of danger from the depths of her soul suddenly enveloped her body and mind. Without any hesitation, Mary leaped away and retreated dozens of meters. With a flick of her finger, a blood-red mist shrouded the place where she originally stood. The blood-red mist was thick and bloody. It contained a terrifying corrosive force of blood. When it came in contact with the air and the ground, strange sizzling sounds of corrosion could be heard. Under the corrosion of the blood-red mist, the lava floor, which was originally as hard as steel, caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye, forming a red pool of blood with a diameter of 3 meters. Mary's body trembled slightly, and her face instantly turned pale. If she had not dodged at that moment, her entire body would have melted into a puddle of blood and melted into the pool. As for her own magic resistance, it was a joke under the corrosive force of blood of this level. Damn it, it was just a prologue battle. How did it turn into a personal show of a high-grade wizard? Without even looking or sensing with her mind, Mary could guess who was going to appear next just by looking at the terrifying elemental blood pool. He was an old rival of the Crimson family, and Mary's mortal enemy in this life. The Blood Knights and Blood Elves who had been rampaging across the battlefield retreated in unison and gathered in front of Mary. Their scarlet eyes stared unblinkingly at the lava passageway leading to the upper levels. In the darkness, a tall, thin figure slowly appeared. While the person's face was still hidden in the darkness, a pair of blood-red eyes with a threatening aura shot straight through the darkness. Arrogance, disdain, and unconcealable hatred shot out from the blood-red eyes, exerting a tyrannical pressure on Mary's consciousness. Mary's body trembled even more violently, and the Blood Knights and Blood Elves in front of her felt their limbs go limp. They fell to the ground and could not help but start to tremble. Heinous? Vic. Mary gritted her teeth and used a cold voice to say this evil name that had a trace of magic. The figure in the darkness slowly moved forward, finally breaking away from the shadows and allowing the light in the stone hall to shine on his body. Exquisite and luxurious noble attire, glossy black, not a single strand of unruly brown hair, and 2 carefully groomed black mustaches. This newcomer's appearance was very different from that of a regular magus. Instead, he was gentle and refined like a human noble. However, the pair of strange blood-red eyes that were as bright as the morning stars betrayed him, shrouding him in a layer of mysterious fog. Compared to the last time, the leader of the Vic family looked much older, and wrinkles also appeared on his face. From this, it could be seen that the leader of the Level 3 vampires had not lived a good life over the past few years. At least in terms of mental strength, he was much more fatigued and dispirited than before. Gargamel, I need support. Mary used a message spell to silently communicate with Gargamel inside the wizard's pagoda. A moment later, a layer of red light appeared on the bodies of Mary and the few Blood Tribe subordinates, temporarily helping them resist the mental pressure of the Level 3 vampire. The vampires who had been lying on the ground in exhaustion instantly recovered their spirits, and each of them crawled up with pale faces. Even though they had temporarily recovered, they still did not dare to look the Level 3 vampire in the eye, afraid that their consciousness would be suppressed again. They had no choice. The source of their bloodline originated from Mary, and the vampire bloodline flowing in Mary's body originated from the Level 3 vampire in front of them. Seeing this vampire was equivalent to seeing the ancestor of their bloodline. It was already not easy for them to stand up straight under the protection of the wizard's pagoda. With Mary's approval, the 4 Blood Tribe subordinates dejectedly transformed into vampire bats and hurriedly escaped underground. As long as Hennis was here, they would not be able to help Mary in the slightest. It was better for them to escape as soon as possible. My lord, these vampires killed 5 of our magi. You can't let them go. Roy, who had hurriedly healed himself and used some strange method to reattach his arms, protested angrily. It was a pity that Hennis, who completely ignored his protests, only had Mary in his eyes. He didn't care about the few grade 2 blood slaves at all. Good. Very good. Hennis laughed coldly. I thought your first thought when you saw me was to run. I did not expect the effects of your fusion with this bloodline to be so good. Good. Very good. This is simply too good. Listening to Hennis muttering to himself, the onlookers could not guess his current mood and thoughts. However, what made the wizards at the scene feel strange was that the rank 2 female vampire did not run away as Wizard Hines was closing in on her. Instead, she bared her fangs and took on a ferocious stance as if she was going to fight back. What? She wants to challenge a level 3 vampire with the strength of a level 2 vampire. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.